to come from the bowels of hell.
The Dana Gould Hour.
Jungle worms and swamp rats run around your feet.
I fought a dog that killed the calf that ate the canary. What is truth?
And once again, welcome back.
And we're back. Episode 1 of Season 14 of the Dana Gould Hour Podcast. Has anything of interest happened since the last episode? Anything on the news? Certainly nothing going on here in LA. Drew Friedman is here. Drew Friedman is one of the premier illustrators and cartoonists in America. You know his work from the New York Observer, The New Yorker, his books, Warts And All, Old Jewish Comedians, More Old Jewish Comedians, Still More Old Jewish Comedians, Too Soon, Drew Friedman's Sideshow Freaks, Heroes of the Comics, More Heroes of the Comics. The list goes on and on. In 1987, I discovered his book, Any Similarity to Persons, Living or Dead, is Purely Coincidental, and it quite literally redefined my sense of humor. It is hard to articulate the impact that book had on me. Drew has a new book out called Schtick Figures. They're portraits of people that are important to Drew and to me. The people he refers to as the cool, the comical, and the crazy. Portraits of people like Gilbert Gottfried, Charles Adams, Bud Abbott, Milton Berle, Lenny Bruce, Lon Chaney Jr., George Carlin, Sid Caesar, Patton Oswalt, Cliff Nesteroff, Robert Crumb, Sammy Davis Jr. The list goes on and on. Jerry Olinger is in here. And if you don't know who Jerry Olinger is, let me rephrase that. If you do know who Jerry Olinger is, you are one of my peeps. Anyway, the book is beautiful. It sits proudly on my coffee table. Drew is also the subject of a new documentary that is about to release entitled The Vermeer of the Borscht Belt. I am proud to say Drew Friedman is here. Kurt Sayenga is a writer, director, and producer. I first met Kurt when he ran the TV series Eli Roth's History of Horror. And Kurt now has a series on Shudder called Horror's Greatest, and Season 2 just dropped, with guests like David Dastmalchian, Joe Hill, Jonah Ray, Alex Winter, Mick Garris, yours truly, and many, many more. Kurt is here to talk about the show as it continues to explore our fascination with all things cinematically horrific. Cinematically horrific. If you want to examine the realistically horrific, True Tales from Weirdsville takes a deep dive into the 1957 classic A Face in the Crowd, starring Andy Griffith, written by Bud Schulberg and directed by Elia Kazan. It tells the cautionary tale of what happens when a corrupt, amoral grifter gains a position of power and influence in American society. It was made in 1957, and it is a creepily, freakishly predictive film. Speaking of amoral grifters, what am I up to? Well, I have a new stand-up comedy special entitled Perfectly Normal, and it is out now. It is 1 hour of me being funny, and you can see it now at 800poundgorillamedia.com. That's the name of the production company. On February 13th, it goes to YouTube, and on February 14th, you can buy the audio version, the album Dana Gould, Perfectly Normal, wherever you get your comedy audio. For details, just run over to danagould.com. On February 22nd, I will be performing on the beautiful island of Oahu at the Blue Note, Hawaii. If you happen to live in Hawaii and can get over to Honolulu, I would love to see you. 2 shows, 1 night, Saturday, February 22nd. If you are a fan of Dr. Z or True Tales from Weirdsville, you may want to follow me on Substack. Just go to substack.com, search Dana Gould, and subscribe. True Tales from Weirdsville and Hanging with Dr. Z have new text versions. For True Tales from Weirdsville, I'm publishing bi-weekly pieces from the library, revised with added links. And for Hanging with Dr. Z, I'm publishing selections of his written show business exploits, all on Substack. So give it a look. It's a good idea. Thank you very much. For links and details for all of this stuff, just visit danagould.com. Lastly, if you like the show, we always encourage you to sign up for our Patreon. Just go to danagould.com, click on the link, and for $5 a month, you become a Dana Gould Hour Sky Cadet. This entitles you to a little something extra every month. Some extra audio, some extra video, you name it. We don't have graduated levels. For $11 a month, I'm not going to come over to give your grandma a perm. $5 a month, become a Sky Cadet, get some stuff. And now, it's on to our 14th season of Filthy Business.
Tune in, it's a gas. It's the Dana Gould Hour Podcast.
The Dana Gould Hour. Free and worth it.
We're delighted to have you with us, and we extend a cordial welcome to you. We've lined up the top stars from Hollywood and from all over the world to entertain you, and your continued patronage is very, very welcome.
It's a crisp winter yet sun-dappled day high atop the Mulholland Drive U-shelf here in the People's Republic of California in the former United States. My guest today is one of those people, a handful of people that I was a giant fan of, was incredibly influential on my developing sense of humor, who I now freakishly count among my friends. It's like, I know this guy. I can email this guy. To me, it is crazy. He first came to be known through the pages of magazines like Screw and Weirdo, and then the New York Observer and Spy. You know his art. And he is the author of a new book entitled Schtick Figures. And there's a documentary about him that's coming out soon called The Vermeer of the Borscht Belt. Please welcome a cultural icon, a national treasure, Drew Friedman.
Thanks, Dana. It's great to see you again.
How are you?
The last time I did this was in November 2017, and guess what had just happened a few days before?
No, I know. It's a terrible cyclical thing.
Everything old is new again.
It's true. I was just talking about that with a friend of mine. It's a lot of what's talked about in your documentary about your predilection towards old show business. And, you know, the Marx Brothers and Lou Jacoby and Milton Berle. And your book, Schtick Figures, is a celebration of old vaudevillian comics and old show business comics. Would you say that's correct?
For the most part, but it's a mix. I mean, it's kind of unexpected, like who you might see in that book, like right. Edward R. Murrow or Kurt Anderson, the former editor of Spy Magazine. Someone said, right. What's he doing in there? I said, well, he edited Spy Magazine, plus he's the one who coined the small hands on Trump.
Really? That was
originally.
Him.
It was him.
But
so there are reasons.
You're much more likely to find Rondo Hatton than Jennifer Aniston. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, I had a policy years ago. I used to get assignments to draw the Friends, the TV show, which I've never seen till today. I still have never seen it. But
you
finally,
you and I both.
Okay, so I finally had to instill a policy saying no more Friends. If you want any Friends drawings, don't call me.
Yeah,
and it worked.
Yeah, but it is.
But yeah, I got Rondo Hatton in the book, and Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr. People you wouldn't necessarily expect, but the word shtick is like kind of wide. It has a wide swath.
Yeah. And you are known, and for people who, I'm sure most people who listen to this podcast know your work, all of those photos from the old New York Observer and Spy Magazine, that they're caricatures, but there's an odd photorealistic quality to your work.
Yeah.
With the stippling and...
picked up on that early on. I love the photographs of Ouija, so I tried to like transplant that into drawing somehow.
Right.
And with the early comics that my brother wrote, especially the Andy Griffith piece, which was the first comic we did, the Andy Griffith where the black guy comes to Mayberry, I just wanted to give that realistic feeling where people would think like, did this really happen?
Yeah.
Did this happen? That was my vibe. That was, because I was a cartoonist. I draw like Basil Wolverton. I wanted to be a mad artist, but then I slowed myself down and picked up on that photographic style.
Yeah. Let me sort of unpack how I came to be familiar with you so that the audience gets a sense of your sense of humor for those that aren't familiar. I loved Spy Magazine and I read the New York Observer, and I didn't get into Weirdo until Weirdo had stopped.
Yeah.
But I had always, I certainly knew what your work was. And then I got in, 1987, I got Any Relation to Persons Living or Dead is Purely Coincidental, which is the book that you created with your brother, Josh.
Right.
And that book is one of the 2 or 3 things that combined to form my sense of humor. If I were to break down like my comedy algorithm, it's like, there's Albert Brooks's manic sense of stage presence, George Carlin's wordplay, and your attitude and references. Those are the 3.
Honored to be included in that group.
It really is. And it was the one cartoon, the whole book is brilliant, but there's a cartoon where Tor Johnson has a nightmare where everywhere he goes, he sees other Tor Johnsons. And he calls old Bela Lugosi in the middle of the night and asks him, Bela, how many Tor? And old Bela Lugosi's on the phone going, how many Tor? And that was literally like life-changing. Like, wait, I can make jokes about this stuff? Like somebody besides me even knows that old Bela Lugosi is a thing?
It was like old Bela Lugosi, but also at the side of his bed on his little night table, there's a syringe and a huge heroin needle and some kind of cocktail, I think. Yeah. And little touches like that maybe some people wouldn't notice, but that's always more interesting for me.
And the story of Joe Franklin, how as a child, Joe Franklin's father worked at a meatpacking plant and would use young Joe's head to swab up entrails.
Yeah, that was a classic Josh Friedman script. That was so defining.
It was so defining. It was so defining for me.
That might have been the panel that set Joe off, where he actually sued me for. No, actually, that wasn't the comic he sued me for. He sued me for the comic where I had him shrinking because he's very touchy. He was very touchy about his height.
The incredibly shrinking Joe Franklin.
And to clarify to people, Joe Franklin was like the East Coast Skippy Lowe.
Perfect.
In case, yeah. So we had Joe Franklin, West Coast had Skippy Lowe.
Exactly.
And you had Nick Edenetti too, his show. The guy who used to imitate Sinatra, he had a cable show. Scott Alexander was a huge fan. And he used to have Chuck McCann on as a guest and like his LA cronies. He's in my book, Schtick Figures.
I would think that whenever you have Chuck McCann as a guest, he should appear behind a medicine cabinet and you would have to open it up.
Hi, guy. Wasn't Groucho Marx actually in one of those commercials? I think he was. Like Chuck McCann's he opens the medicine and Groucho Marx is standing there. I guess that was Aaron Fleming's doing.
Okay. I'm glad you said that because now I can get into kind of like enter the story at the middle. Your father, you grew up in New York. Your father is the novelist Bruce J. Friedman. He was. Well, he still is. He's always your father. Who wrote North Dallas 40 and all these. He was a magazine editor, and then he became a novelist, a very celebrated novelist. And so you grew up in New York, but because your dad worked in magazines, you had an early exposure to the giants of the field.
Well, the comic book field, because his office was the next office to Stan Lee's office, because they both worked at this company called Magazine Management, run by Martin Goodman. So, so as a kid, my brothers and I would go visit my dad up at his office on Madison Avenue. And, I made a beeline for the comic book department, and Stan Lee was the host. I mean, he was like, just Mr. Charm. And he took a liking to me because he knew I liked to draw.
And you're how old at this point?
5, 6.
Yeah, because you started drawing like 3 or 4. Like you could pick up a crayon.
I became obsessed with drawing really early on, and it's like basically all I wanted to do all the time, including in school. And I would get in trouble for that.
Yeah, because but it is a gift. It's a weird gift that you never had to like. What am I going to do? Like,
well, yeah, it's kind of like I had no choice. And, I saved everything I've ever drawn. I still have it. And I look at some of my stuff from when I was a little kid, and I think, like, if I were the parent of this child, I don't know if I would have encouraged him. I mean, I don't see any quality there. But, I kept at it. That's the thing. Most kids, like, when they draw, they stop drawing as they get older, and they move on to other things. I kept drawing,
Yeah.
So that's to perfect. And I'm still trying to perfect.
Yeah, you're going to get there.
Yeah, I'm still not there yet. But I think with Schtick Figures, I'm close, but I'm not there yet. So
you and your brothers are with your dad. It's 1975.
Right.
And you're in LA. Now, your dad now is pretty well-established writer. And you're out in LA, and he takes you to this house in, I think it's Malibu.
Well, that's where we lit. We were staying in Malibu.
Oh, you
that
stayed
summer.
in Malibu. You went to a house in Hollywood Hills.
Hollywood Hills, right?
And knocks on the door and opens the door, and there is
85-year-old Groucho Marx. In his shorts, with his pith helmet on, and with a Hawaiian shirt. And he, we were invited to the.
Did he really have the pith helmet on?
He had the pith helmet, yeah, because he had a collection of hats, like right up front in his, when you walk in, there's a whole collection of hats. But he had the helmet on. He was dressed as old Groucho Marx. I don't think he had a Mickey Mouse shirt on, but he had I think it was a Hawaiian shirt. But we were invited to the house via Aaron Fleming, who I think had a crush on my dad, and they knew each other slightly from New York and L.A. Aaron used to hang out with the younger Hollywood crowd.
Aaron E.R. Aaron is a lady.
Groucho's lady friend. Girlfriend, yeah,
Nurse.
which used to run. Yeah, so she invited us to Groucho's house. She said, Groucho loved children. Please come visit. So we went on a Saturday, like early afternoon, and I think we were the first guests to arrive.
Now, how old
Groucho
are you now?
opened the door and welcomed us. He said, my dad said, hi, Groucho. I'm Bruce J. Friedman. These are my 3 sons. And Groucho said, it's a pleasure to meet you and your 3 lovely daughters. So, and then it just like went on like that. It was just like,
I'd like to also point out to the listening audience that there is a distinction between Groucho and old Groucho.
Right. There's like
perfected by Gilbert Gottfried.
Exactly. 3 levels of Groucho. It's like, the classic early Groucho up until the 40s. And then you have You Bet Your Life Groucho,
right.
A little older, more seasoned. And then the later Groucho, which is, what Gilbert perfected as far as his imitation, the Groucho who was like complaining about like, how show business was becoming filthy and, and it was big steered around by Aaron. Yeah, Groucho, and the voice got a little higher, and that's the Groucho we had. But even though he was slowed down by several strokes, he was still as fast and sharp as ever, even though you had to be a little patient, with his quips. And I talk about some of this in this documentary that's coming out, Vermeer, the Borscht Belt. But it was the same Groucho, but just really slowed down. But he did an hour's worth of songs with Aaron Fleming filling in for Margaret Dumont, which was amusing. The old songs from the old films. Because
it was sort of, I guess you'd call it a salon, where it's not a show, but like you guys were the only people at the house. Like there were
actually there were little by little more people were filing in, and Sally Kellerman showed up, and Elliot Gould, Bud Cort was there,
and this is 1975, so these guys are huge. And Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys.
Dennis Wilson showed up, and my theory was, not at the time, but I kind of figured it out later, that Aaron Fleming would get these Hollywood people there, with the temptation, because she was offering cocaine. Because I remember seeing like a bowl of white stuff in the bathroom. And a lot of these people would walk in and walk through the house, wave to Groucho, and like disappear into the bathroom.
That's
so I think I doubt that's why my father brought us, but I think that's why she was like all these people were showing up at Groucho's house, and not just the thrill of meeting old Groucho Marx, but I think that's my theory, and I think I'm correct. But aside from all that, it was an amazing afternoon, and we actually put him to bed. We stayed till like 7:30, and then You Bet Your Life was coming on TV because they'd just gone back into syndication, and Groucho was watching it every night. So he would get in his pajamas, get in bed and watch You Bet Your Life, and then go to bed. So we actually helped him get into his pajamas. Now, my one regret is we didn't take photographs, because there were no iPhones then. So that's if I have any regret in life, that's one of them. Oh, there's a second regret too. When we got home, Aaron Fleming called the next morning and said, Groucho loved seeing you guys. He'd like to invite you back next week because Mae West is coming to the house. They haven't seen each other for 35 years since they were both at Paramount. So my dad said, boys, Groucho invited us back to the house next week. Do you want to go? And we looked, my brothers and I looked at each other and said, nah, we had enough Groucho. That's my second regret in life.
Plus also you might have ended up having to sleep with Mae West, which might have been.
Well, I don't know. He's like, did you ever hear the Steve Rossi story about Mae West? No. This was told on Howard Stern. It's the best Steve Rossi story. It's very short. Steve Rossi, of Alan and Rossi, the straight man, said that Mae West was blowing him in Las Vegas backstage, right? So he said when she took his penis out of her mouth, her teeth were still connected to the penis. So there you go. That's show business.
I love those old. I had a project with Sid and Marty Krofft. We were gonna when they were doing the Land of the Lost movie, we were also going to do Sigmund the Sea Monster movie, and it was going to be like a Gremlins, like a kids action comedy,
right?
And I wrote it, and I say this, when Land of the Lost opened to not great business, I got a call. Dana, it's Marty. You could stop writing. Will Ferrell fucked it up. But we go to pitch it, and we go to pitch it to Fox, and I believe the woman's name is Emma Watson, who's a big executive at Fox. We pitch it, and you can tell she's not buying it. And we walk out, and everybody makes a beeline for their cars, leaving me alone with Marty. And what I realized was they all knew what was coming, and I didn't. So Marty, you think I need to put up with that bullshit? And then the weirdest thing that he says, like people go like, I sold out Carnegie Hall. I did. He looks at me and he goes, I fucked Sid Charisse.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
But that's the thing is, it's like show business never changes. It's just the cast changes, but it's all the
how
same
are you
thing.
supposed to respond to that? I fucked Sid Charisse. Now I would have had questions like, well, did you fuck her before Tony Martin married her, or was it after, or like what?
Why did you say that in the meeting?
Yeah, really, that was a game changer. If you had known that, your behavior would have been more respectful.
What I also find interesting is you said it's like, so it's 1975, and it's so like the year wore bell bottoms, like that was 70s. And you're up doing watching Dennis Wilson do blow at Groucho Marx's house. But then you say that Dennis Wilson approached Groucho Marx and said, like, it's an honor to meet you, sir.
Right.
Which I love. He's polite. Like, he's still a kid from Hawthorne with an abusive father. He's still like, sir, hello.
Yeah. Yeah, Dennis, he showed up, and we kind of knew him because he was dating a young actress who my father dated. So there was a connection there.
Who was this actress?
She was attractive. She was blonde, and her name escapes me right now. She was in one episode of Columbo. She was kind of freckled, and she had blonde hair. She was very cute, but she was dating him. So he came in with her. And approach Groucho. It's an honor to meet you, sir. And Groucho looked at him, clearly had no idea who he was, and he goes, "It ought to be." And it's just one of those moments.
Yeah. Oh, there's the other one. Your brother was referencing the old vaudeville theater because you're trying to find a connection with him.
this is also, I just talk about this in the documentary. There's no reason for anybody to see the documentary now because I'm going to give it all away.
No, you have to see it.
My brother Josh, we knew that Groucho had lived in Great Neck, Long Island, when back in the 20s when he was going to Broadway, when he was doing Broadway shows before he moved to Hollywood. So we lived in Great Neck too in the 60s. And so we knew this Playhouse Theater was a movie theater, but it had been a vaudeville theater, a burlesque vaudeville theater. So my brother Josh asked Groucho, he said, Groucho, do you remember this theater, the Playhouse Theater on Middle Neck Road in Great Neck? They used to have an old organ in the back. And Groucho, without missing a beat, said, well, I got an old organ myself. and
you wonder if he was that quick or if that was the 700th time he said that.
I think it might have been the first. He was that quick. It was amazing just to watch him. And I would just watch him. I sat at the table while they were giving him his dinner, and just to stare at him like a mental case. They gave him like cream chicken, and he was dripping it down his chin. And I was just standing there, I was sitting there watching him. He was looking back at me. We weren't really talking, But at that moment, I thought like, possibly I'm the luckiest kid on the planet at this moment that I'm sitting here at Groucho Marx's table watching him eat his dinner.
Yeah. Well, and also at the. So how old are you at this point? Like 12,
I think 14, 15.
Yeah.
15. Yeah.
Yeah. Most kids in 1975 in Southern California didn't want to go to Groucho Marx's house.
Oh, yeah. I knew that. Yeah.
That was I remember that summer cry. You should have been seeing Jaws. That's what everybody did that summer.
Which I did.
Sure.
But, it was more fun to be at Groucho's house. But, it's like, you and I and people and our friends, we were into something, I love black and white movies and black and white TV shows. I thought the world was black and white back in the old days, and I was hopeful that was the case. Like, I just love that. And I wanted to capture that in my work. But, that's what I was interested in. When things went color, it was like kind of lost me.
It is a weird thing. I was talking to name dropping. I was talking to Bill Hader this morning, our friend from the email group,
our private group,
and he's like, "What did you do last night?" And I said, "I get so excited. I saw Severn Darden and Barbara Steele on the same Alfred Hitchcock Presents."
Wow. Well, I was absorbing
with Joel Crothers from Dark Shadows, who quote never married unquote.
A confirmed bachelor.
Yeah, which was just that, back in the 70s, that's how they said it.
I was just like absorbed with the Beat Generation this morning. What you sent the Beat poems from Vampira and the other girl. I'm not sure her name.
I don't know her name either. She is in the opening song. She's in the opening credits of this podcast.
Sure.
She's
on.
She's
great. She's great.
She's so sexy. It's crazy.
She is sexy, and her delivery is similar to not Jane Curtin, not Gilda Radner. Lorraine Newman. Similar delivery. If Lorraine Newman were to deliver a Beat poem,
she looks like every girl I tried to date. Yeah. And I can assure you, I know exactly what that woman looks like angrily moving out of an apartment.
She is very sexy. And I wonder if she was connected.
I bought a dog that killed the cat that ate the bird. What is truth?
Beautiful. I wonder if Albert Zugsmith had anything to do with her.
Well, I'm sure, because that's from High School Confidential.
Yeah.
But Jackie Coogan is in both. He's not only in both movies, he's in both scenes.
Yeah. Well, Chick only did the money. What can you say?
And Mila Nurmi is also in High School Confidential. Very briefly.
Yeah. She's like weird in that one because I think you can see that she's missing some teeth, perhaps.
Yeah, Mila was missing. Well, she had bad teeth. And she didn't have great nutrition. I think she had an eating. You would say nowadays you would say she had an eating disorder.
You could kind of pick up on that. Yeah, I really enjoyed the biography of her by her niece, I guess, that came out. That you're quoted.
I thought they did a really good job.
Yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I also love the fact that they talked about her boyfriends. She goes from Orson Welles to Marlon Brando to James Dean to Elvis Presley. That's pretty amazing. That's quite
pretty amazing. Yeah, Orson Welles is not. Mila had a son who she put up for adoption.
That's right.
Before she was married. And there's a story that it is Orson Welles' son. It is not.
Okay.
It is I can't think of the actor's name. He's an actor in New York in the 50s. I've actually spoken to her son. He's a great guy. He's a lawyer. He lives in Vermont. And he was like, he didn't know his mom at all. We talked online, and he's painfully normal. He's like, hey man, thanks.
Right, well, that's nice to know. There's a picture of him in the back of the book, and he looks absolutely nothing like Orson Welles. Nothing, not a trace.
He's a lawyer. He's a lawyer. He lives in Vermont. He's just, just a very nice.
Good to know.
Yeah, and he was just like, hey, thanks for helping my mom. It's really nice of you. It's just like a really nice, normal person.
Nice to know.
Mila's a great example of the sort of area that you work in that I also love. I was never interested in like the giant, like I'm much more interested in Mila Nurmi than her boyfriend, her buddy James Dean. I'd rather read about Dave Van Ronk than John Lennon. You know, I find it more interesting, the people in show business that just made a living.
Yeah, well, you know, we agree on that, of course. And, you know, like to dwell on Tor Johnson and Joe Franklin, these people who are in the fringes is like, you know, been my thing for years and in a way still is, you know, the people that my dad used to say, Drew pays attention to the people nobody else pays attention to. And it's true. I was like obsessed with elevator men in our building in New York and the guys who were selling the newspapers.
Please tell what an elevator man is for people who don't know what an elevator man is.
There's no more that exists as far as I know. But I was these elevator men, when we moved to New York, we lived in the Dakota building on Central Park West and 90th Street. Yeah, it's a famous building. Ernie Kovacs had lived there. Faye Dunaway was our upstairs neighbor on
John
the 20th
Lennon
floor.
lived there.
No, I'm sorry. I said the Dakota. I apologize. You can cut that. It was actually the El Dorado on 90th Street.
The El Dorado. I see.
Yeah, we didn't live in the Dakota.
If John Lennon had lived in the El Dorado, he'd still be alive.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I used to walk by the El Dorado every day to go to school. I mean, the Dakota to go to school every day because I went to school nearby. But we lived in the El Dorado, which was the Twin Towers up on 90th Street, right overlooking Central Park West. Faye Dunaway lived in the building when we moved in, and Martin Balsam, my dad's friend David Newman, the screenwriter. But Ernie Kovacs had lived there, but this building had elevator men that would take different shifts, and we got to know them. We knew them by their first name, and we talked to them. Especially my brother Josh and I.
And their job was to push a button.
They basically push a button, but you know, it took some skill. You had to like land the sort of like in Rosemary's Baby, where you know
elevators were manual. Like you'd have to.
It was a manual thing, so you had to really level it off, like so you know people didn't have to jump like she did in Rosemary's Baby,
or the ghost in Mr. Chicken.
Exactly.
There's a great elevator man
but we got to know these guys, and then we created like, you know, lives for them. Like, you know, we just imagined like what they did after hours and things like that. And, you know, so I did a tribute to a New York elevator man, a vanishing breed a couple of years later for Weirdo magazine. But yeah, I don't think you can find an elevator man in New York now. I seriously doubt it.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's, you know, there was this, you talk about just the concept of a magazine. Like when your father worked at magazine management, it's so funny because the names of the magazines that he edited were like Men, you know, these weird.
He edited for Man's World. Like they were like macho. They were fiction magazines, so he would hire, you know, stories, but it was like men like in the jungle or Men in War or things like that, or not cowboys.
It's what's amazing, and this is late 50s?
Mid to late 50s. He retired in 1966.
Yeah, okay. So it's these magazines like, Men, Man's World. Not, if you find a magazine today that's called Man's World, it's probably something different.
Exactly.
But it was a celebration of macho culture. It was a celebration of macho men. It's still as big today as it was then, only now it's podcasts.
That was it basically. One of the other magazines was True Action, I think. He edited 4, and they were, you know, these macho fiction stories.
The cover would be a great painting of a guy punching out an alligator.
Yeah, beautiful artwork on the cover by Norm Saunders and some great illustrators. It would be a combination of these stories, cartoons that he would also select, and girly pictures, and, you know, cheesecake pictures of ladies. Yeah. So that was it. That was like what he did for about a decade. At this company,
and because of the, you know, the news, you know, it's something that's not what it used to be. You know, there was no internet and there were 2 TV channels or 3 TV channels, and magazines were the internet. And there were so many of them. And for whatever was your interest, like you could get Man's World, or you would get Famous Monsters, or, Playboy. And it employed writers and artists and all of these great writers, Harlan Ellison and Ray Bradbury and all these James Ellroy. They made their livings, and your father made their living selling stories to magazines.
Basically, yeah, he was, he was editing those magazines. He's also selling short stories to Playboy and Esquire at the time, right. And also writing his books, his novels, right. On the train and late at night when he get home and stuff. So, he had a lot of energy back then, but, finally he didn't need the magazine editing, and he retired from that in 1966. But, magazines, I was obsessed with comic books and 2 magazines in particular, Mad and Famous Monsters of Filmland. Mm-hmm. And it was a little later when I, discovered Castle of Frankenstein, some of the better ones, some of the, the more intelligent ones.
Now, did your father know Jim Warren? That wasn't magazine.
No, that wasn't really part of his world.
Magazine management.
I became obsessed with James Warren and the magazines he was putting out, all of them, including Screen World and Screen Thrills and Creepy and Eerie and all that stuff.
And you've read Empire. I'm sure you've read Empire of Monsters.
Sure. It was great. And now I'm friends with him.
Great.
We talk.
Do tell, because what I find fascinating about James Warren is he was Don Draper.
He was. He was one. Yeah, he was the madman. He's still kicking. He's 94 now. He lives in Philadelphia, and he doesn't own a computer. He doesn't know anything about. I mentioned podcasts because Gilbert Gottfried wanted to have him on as a guest. He didn't know what I was talking about. He doesn't own a computer. He writes long letters. I just got a long letter from him about my book Schtick Figures, and I actually showed some of the letter on Facebook. But he just went through the book and talked about all the people he knew in the book, and some of them he knew well. Like Ouija lived in his apartment, and of course Zachary was his pal. And he said, "I put him on the cover of Famous Monsters in 1959, and the rest is history." Like that.
Mila knew Ouija also.
Yeah. And of course he knew Tor Johnson, and he knew, Boris Karloff, all those guys, Lon Chaney. And it's pretty legendary. Now, he didn't like that book, The Empire of Monsters. He didn't like it. And he's supposedly writing his own book. He's going to clear things up.
But he comes across great in that book. It's just the only thing about that book that was surprising was that he fucked everything.
Yeah, he was, and he's still at it.
He was a swinger. He was a swinger. Like
he was a swinger, and then I've heard he used to have nudist party. Like he had parties in his house in West Hampton, and you'd have to get naked to get in the pool.
Well, the I read it on this podcast. I won't do it again, but the personal ad that he took out and screwed.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah,
massages on the back, massages on the front.
Also, I own a bidet. Yeah. Now, who could resist that?
Yeah. He was, it's so funny. I just told the story the other day and I totally forgot it. Apropos of absolutely nothing. I used to live in this house in Laurel Canyon. I do as we speak, but this is another house in Laurel Canyon, lower down the hill back in the early 90s. Me and a bunch of people. And my bedroom had a bidet for some reason. Had a big bathroom with a bidet in it. And I didn't know what it was at first. And I did like a Jerry Lewis movie, looked at it, turned it on, got splashed in the face.
Yeah.
So one night somebody breaks into our garage and steals my roommate's bike. We call the police. They come and they notice that there were 16 phone lines in our house that are not working anymore, but they're worse. And then it was a very famous gay brothel in the 60s and early 70s. Wow.
Was Richard Deacon part of it?
I hope so. But if so, he cleaned out in my bathroom because I had the bidet. I had the bidet.
I'm bringing up Richard Deacon because I know you
Dick
had
Deacon before he dicks you, as they used to say.
You had Bert Kearns on as a guest recently, and that was a great interview. Bert, of course, wrote the Shemp Howard book, which I did the forward to. It's a great book. I love that book so much that I went back and reread his Lawrence Tierney book, which is great too. But I asked him recently, so what's next? And he said, well, I'm thinking about doing a Richard Deacon biography. So I am so behind that. I've actually hooked him up with Bill Persky, who was the writer, one of the main writers and producers on the Dick Van Dyke Show, who knew Richard Deacon pretty well over 4 years and has some great stories. So hopefully that'll be happening.
Yeah, and that show was so. That's a pretty timeless show.
Yeah,
if you want to learn how to write sitcoms, you can't do better than the Dick Van Dyke Show. It's two fully fledged out worlds. Just the Maury Amsterdam and Rose Marie, like they make the other half of that show.
It's true. It was 6 years of it too, and it was all great, except for the very last episodes. If you remember, they would start dressing Dick up as like a motorcycle rider, a cowboy, a bullfighter. It was like Fred Sanford at the end of Sanford and Son. What do we dress him up like this week?
It's very the Munsters.
Yeah, it's kind of it's jumping the shark. And, you can see that at the end of Dick Van Dyke Land. Maybe they'd all had enough. Mary was ready to start her big movie career.
Yep,
etc.
She was going to play a nun next to Elvis.
Yeah,
she was in the. Mary Tyler Moore was the girl in the last Elvis movie, quote unquote.
Yeah, she was a nun.
Which was, a change of habit.
There was two girls, her and Barbara McNair, and Elvis. Ed Asner was in that film too. It's one of those films that's so bad it's good, but it's not even very good. It's just so bad.
But it's also like Elvis at the end of his rope, getting ready to reinvent himself.
I think it's his last film, and of course, the title is a double meaning title, Change of Habit. But it's not even worth watching. It's it's just not good. It's fascinating, but
it is fascinating. I always used to say 1967. You think about the music industry and show business in 1967. It was so hippie, groovy, counterculture-y.
Yeah.
And Elvis made a movie called Clam Bake. Best movie ever made about a clam bake.
Wow.
Which features the song Clam Bake. Really? Not to be confused with Do the Clam, written by Dolores Fuller.
Is that the one with Bill Bixby's been? I guess I've seen that somehow.
Yeah.
I've actually watched that Clam Bake.
Yeah.
Was that Nancy Sinatra too, or was that something? That was Spin Out. I'm sorry.
That was Spin Out.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know if Do the Clam is in Clam Bake or if it's in Paradise Hawaiian Style, but it was written by Ed Wood's ex-girlfriend, Dolores Fuller.
Were there actually people who went to see the Elvis Presley's latest films at that point, like in the late 60s?
Yeah, that was the thing. You forget that all of this stuff goes on at the same time. Have you seen A Complete Unknown yet?
Not yet.
Okay. I really liked it. I thought it was great. I love Dylan.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah,
I'm reserving my opinion. I don't think the guy really looks like him too much, but
No, but he looks as much like Bob Dylan as Val Kilmer looked like Jim Morrison. That's fine. Yeah. It's good enough. And it tells, I thought they did a really good job. I'm not a, it's like if you've ever made a movie, you know how hard it is to make a movie. Like, hey, God bless them. They got it done.
I can't wait to see. I have Bob Dylan in my book, Schtick Figures. He counts as a Schtick figure.
Yes, you do. But at the height of this, like the folk, Gertie's Folk City and the height of the New York Greenwich Village folk scene was at the same time the height of early rock and roll.
Sure.
It was, Little Richard and Elvis, and like all that stuff was going on at the same time. And it wasn't like folk was the only focus in music. It was also, this was going, these things run parallel. Not everybody thought The Summer of Love was great. Not everybody was at Woodstock. Most people thought it was annoying. And they just went to see Elvis movies. And, at the same time as the Smothers Brothers were on TV, Hee Haw was also huge. There's a lot of stuff goes on at the same time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder about the Elvis films. Like, he had fans in the late 50s who just worshipped him. And were those same fans still going to see, Clambake and, those late 60s films? Like, who was actually going to see them? Like,
at that point? It was the hardcores, the same people that was seeing him in 77 when he was bloated. And,
it
was just, so. It's Trump supporters. It's,
I was going to go there with that, but, it's like, yeah. It's like, go figure.
I was with I took my kids up to Mammoth this weekend to go skiing. It's a little annual trip we take. And we always stop at this place. There's a little town about 2 hours south of Mammoth in the Sierras called Lone Pine. And they filmed a lot of Westerns up in Lone Pine. There's actually a Western film museum there. And we always stop at the Mount Whitney Cafe, which is really like a Twin Peaks set when you walk in. But every photo on the wall, and it's one of those things where the wall is just framed photos. 2 out of every 3 photos is of John Wayne.
Wow.
It's just like, that's these people, and during COVID, they were like big sign on the door, you do not have to wear a mask, but that's a giant chunk of this country.
Sure.
And it is like Trump in this regard. I could tell them John Wayne was a draft dodger. His real name was Marion, that he could have served in World War II and didn't. John Ford never forgave him. They don't want to hear it.
It doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter. Right. It's the personality, or what they're told is the personality.
Right. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's like McGovern was, Richard Nixon in World War II played cards. McGovern flew 27 missions. Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I'm resigned to that. It's true.
You really have to keep it close now. And it's very much like what you're talking about. It's like everything old is new, and it gets more, the colors might get brighter. It might get a little louder, but it's not, it's nothing new. It's nothing new. I was saying to somebody, I was like, even if the Democrats win in the midterms, they probably will. Even if they win the presidency in 2028, like something is broken to me. Like people saw, like I can see why my brother voted for George W. Bush over Al Gore, but to see that choice and people go, yeah, that's good. January 6th doesn't matter. Let's give it to him again. To me, I'm just like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And someone said, "Oh, you're seeing the country the way minorities always have."
Interesting.
Yeah. Like,
yeah, I try not to think about it. I think about Tor Johnson and
me too. Me too.
Yeah. I just keep things in perspective.
Yeah. and back then it was the blacklist. It was, Japanese internment. There's always something. There's always
good points. Good points.
Slavery. Yeah, just pull one out of thin air. Slavery.
Good points.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's always but the period of time that we are so that I find so pleasurable to revisit in my mind, in the 40s and 50s, it was such a different country. I mean, Mila was telling me that, one of the reasons Vampire was so shocking is like, it was 1954, and that is not the 50s. What people think of as the 50s is late 57, 58 through 63.
Or Ozzie and Harriet and Leave It to Beaver. And, that's the easy way to go. But
yeah, but 54 was still very much the 40s.
Sure.
Culturally. And what she was doing was incredibly risque.
I'm sorry I never got to meet her. Or I never got to meet any of the Ed Wood people, because I'm East Coast, of course. Right. But, I was doing those drawings of Ed Wood and, before anybody really knew who he was, they knew him as the guy who made the worst film of all time, which is not true. But, I was doing, and I get a couple of letters from some of them, especially Kelton the cop, who wanted to be in touch, and some of the other guys, some of the guys who were still around. But, I just had nothing to do with them.
Make the generous offer of having you join the Paul Marco fan club?
Yeah, I still have it on my bulletin board.
Yeah, I know.
I got all his literature. I have a script, actually, a Plan 9 script with all their autographs on it.
Wow, that's impressive.
But I just never had anything to do with any of them,
But
which
you were
I didn't
a big
avoid
part
them.
of-
I just, I was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah.
So-
Well, I became, it's so funny. I became exposed to like Plan 9 in the mid 80s when everybody else did. I'd known about it because of Famous Monsters and stuff, but I finally saw how it was funny. And it really, as I said before, like it really helped define my sense of humor. And then when I got your and Josh's book, everything kind of like congealed. It's like, no, I love this. And then you can make fun of this stuff. This is bananas to me. Because there's just these weird fringe people doing what they wanted to do. That was,
God bless them.
Yeah,
I grew up when I was a little kid. They didn't show Plan 9 from Outer Space on TV in New York in the 60s. But they would use some of the footage on the opening of Chiller Theater. So they had a great footage with Tor Johnson and the vampire walking through the graveyard. And I thought to myself, when I see this film, it's probably going to be the best horror film ever made because that footage is so incredible.
It is shot beautifully.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So, if I finally got to see it on cable TV in like 1980 in New York, and, I already knew it was like listed as the worst film of all time in the Bad Bid book. But, I enjoyed it, but, it certainly wasn't scary or it was just fascinating, right off the bat. It was just fascinating. I was glued to it.
Yeah.
And,
it stays interesting all the way through.
Yeah. There's always something new to discover about it.
Just when you think they've run out of gas.
Right. I think
Dudley
I saw another bug on the sheet in the background where the guy has the binoculars. I saw a second bug on the sheet, and that was like worth watching it again for just to notice that. But, I mentioned I'd never met any of those people, and I'm always like trepidatious about meeting my heroes and to have met, Vampira or, my friend Glenn Bray was friends with Tor Johnson when he was a kid in the 60s because they both lived in Silmar. So
okay. I've been to that. Well, I've been to that house. I just went there with Harry Medved for a PBS thing that's airing, I think, next week. I'll send you the link for it. It's location. It's a location show.
Yeah,
and we did the Plan 9 locations all in Silmar, mostly in Silmar. The grave, the cemetery, what's left of the cemetery, the police station. And Tor Johnson's house.
Yeah, the house that Bela Lugosi, they made it his house.
Right. And I was just there. It's a small little, and here's the weird thing. It's right across the way from Nurmi Street.
Interesting.
Which is just like, I've never seen that before. Spelled exactly the way Milo spelled it. Yeah, because Tor Johnson's son was a cop in Silmar.
Right.
He plays the farmer that picks up Mrs. Trent as she wanders.
And he was
out of the
also on You
cemetery.
Bet Your Life.
I did not know that. I did not.
Yeah,
know
he's
that.
on You Bet Your Life with his dad. He comes on. Tor introduces him, and he walks out there, not in his police outfit, but he's a big guy like Tor. Yeah, that's on YouTube.
Is that in the Plan 9 Companion, or is that the same episode?
It might have been. I haven't watched that in years, but it's possible they use that. I think they have some clips of Tor, and Tor held his own on You Bet Your Life. He was good. Groucho liked him.
Yeah, what's your name? Tor Johnson. Tor Johnson. Why'd you do that?
And he gets everything wrong. Every question, he has no clue. For some reason, he picked Greek poetry. I think he has no clue. He gets every single one wrong. But back in the early 80s, my friend took me to that house, and I got out of the car and walked around the grounds, and there was a Mexican guy he seemed to own the house, and he was like tending his garden. And I said, there was a famous movie actor who used to live here. And the guy looked at me like I was crazy. And I said, Tor Johnson. He had no idea what I was talking about.
When we went, they know. And they're very nice. In fact, the scene where Bela Lugosi wanders out of the graveyard and then goes into the Trent house. Mm-hmm. Well, then Tom Mason goes into the Trent house.
Yeah.
The front door of the Trent house is the back door of that house. It's the same.
Well, now I have to watch that film again.
Yeah.
When we get off.
But they have all of these they go, this guy keeps sending us these letters and he wants to buy the house. And I went, may I see that letter, please? And they're all from Jason and Sulaco, who is Paul Marco's nephew.
That's great.
Yeah, who has Bella's cane and
like uncle, like nephew.
Yeah,
like,
it's very beautiful.
That's great. Nice to know.
But it's just like, I would absolutely. I would absolutely try to buy it if I could.
Yeah. Well, what would you do with it? Would you you'd have to like relocate it, I suppose.
Yeah. Or just make it a Plan 9 museum and just like, this is where it is.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Bob Goldthwait and I, the Quality Studios, which is where they shot it, is now it's now a hipster bar called Gold Diggers, and bands play there. My friend's band plays there, and Quality Studios is also in the back. We visited there with Harry Medved for this location show. But before it was a cool hipster bar, it was kind of like a rundown Thai bar. And we heard it was for sale, and Bob Goldthwait and I looked at each other like, we can't. We're going to lose our shirts if we do this, but we have considered buying it just so we could say we own it.
I know the feeling. When the Friars Club went up for sale a couple of months ago in New York, I actually considered it not to buy it myself, but I know a few rich people who love show business, and I really thought, like, it's like, what a great idea to buy the Friars Club, turn it into like comedy museum, still have shows there and comedians, and but I didn't follow through.
I had lunch with Milton Berle at the LA Friars Club, and I literally, I had to like leave those clothes outside for a day. The cigar stench was so permeating.
Holy mackerel. Was he in a wheelchair yet?
No, this is 92.
Okay.
91?
Yeah.
91?
Yeah.
He was still, he definitely was Milton Berle.
Jeff Ross talks about meeting Milton Berle. He was in the wheelchair already, and angry, really angry, especially, comedians don't like to be with other comedians. That's my theory, I think, because they want to be the funny ones. But he took a dislike to Jeff and like really grasped, like held on to his hand. And Jeff said, it was actually hurting me. He was holding on to me so hard.
I had that experience with Bob Hope when I did a TV commercial with Bob Hope because I was on the second to last Bob Hope special.
You were one of the young new comics, right?
Yeah, that's how it was billed. The second to last Bob Hope special. But yeah, he just, I get it. Like, if you don't, the ego that drives you to be that person deprives you of being able to share. I'm happy to, the reason I'm not that famous is because I'm happy for you to have success. Go.
Of course. But maybe when you're 90, things will change. I don't know. It's like, we evolve, but I have to just go back to Milton Berle for a second. Did he show it to you?
There's nothing else interesting about him.
Well, did he show it to you?
No. It was at the Friars Club and was with Bud Friedman.
Because he would love to show it.
We're talking about,
he would ask people, would you like to see it?
Milton's giant cock.
Yeah. It's like my friend Alan Zweibel was, a writer when Milton did SNL back in the early 80s. And he actually took him aside and said, would you like to see it? And Zweibel, before he could say no, Milton took it out and showed it to him. So Alan said it was like looking like at a discolored tongue you would see in a delicatessen.
Yeah, he said
like purplish.
It looked like a beet.
Right. But he didn't even ask to see it. Milton just took it right out. And another person, Valerie Brayman, she saw it too. He asked her and she said, sure. And, it's like some people like they just never forgot. It's like one of the most disturbing things,
Yeah.
You just can't get rid of that memory.
It is it's such a strange, that's really what he's known for more than anything else.
Yeah. Well,
Forrest Tucker and Hunts Hall.
Yeah. And there's a few others. Eddie Fisher, supposedly.
Oh, okay.
Guy Marks, the comedian, who did Loving You Is Making Me Bananas, that song, supposedly. There's a few of them, but Milton was really, he was proud of it. And even though he went on Howard Stern, and Howard would only want to talk about that. That's it. And Milton said, Howard, would you please grow up? Why do we have to only talk about that? So Howard changed the subject and said, within 5 minutes, Milton said, could we please get back to my penis? He took great pride in that.
I might cut this. Mila told me that Elvis was not circumcised, which is not a surprise. And
like John Lennon.
Yes. But Elvis apologized to her for his, quote, hillbilly pecker.
Very good. That's being cut? Oh, well.
Yeah, I think out of Jeff. Milo's a bit of a maternal figure to me.
I understand.
I have to honor that. I have a really funny photo I'll send you. I took my, I set her up to sign photos and make some cash at this Halloween parade in LA. And I just remember it was hot as balls. And she was wearing a turban and doing her job. And my oldest daughter was pretty young at the time. She was maybe probably 4 or 5. And we're sitting together, and there's a lot of great photos, but there's one where my daughter is picking up some of her money, just playing with it. She's 4 or 5 years old. And Mile is eyeballing her like a hawk to make sure that my daughter doesn't steal her money. she's got an eye on my daughter like that. I'll send that to you.
I know that eye. When I used to visit Joe Franklin in his office on 43rd Street, towards the end of his life, he had that eye, watching everybody just to make, because there was garbage all over the floor, old letters, unopened letters, FedEx packages, whatnot. But he would eye everybody who was sitting there, like, just to make sure you don't walk away with anything. He had that eye.
And he sued you, correct?
He sued me, yeah, in 1984 over a comic strip I did about him shrinking that was in heavy metal for $40 million, which, I've said is a reasonable sum. At the time, I think I had $10 in the bank at the time, but it was dismissed. The judge said, like, this, how could you sue over a comic strip? Obviously, it's a parody, it's like, and other reasons too.
What was his defamation?
Yeah, I have the court, I have all the papers to do with the case, and, it's like a thick file. It's like he was defamed. And also in the comic, I said to be continued. So I was going to do a sequel to it, 2 sequels to it, which I never did. It's like that was the end of that. But the only thing it cost me was $1 to go up to meet with the National Lampoon's lawyers, who owned heavy metal. Okay. Just to meet with them. And basically, they settled it out of court. Or, the judge dismissed it, so it never. Yeah, I was kind of looking forward to it. I thought it would have been interesting if it went to court and went to trial, but it didn't. But Joe, he also wanted to sue Billy Crystal at the time, or around that time, and Uncle Floyd, who did a parody, Joe Frankfurter, and then later on, after that film, with the joke, with the long joke,
The Aristocrats.
Yeah, Aristocrats. He wanted to sue Sarah Silverman because Sarah Silverman says that Joe Franklin raped me. So he considered he considered suing her as well, but he didn't go. He didn't go for that one. But
yeah, I knew that
he sued me for $40 million. He sued Uncle Floyd for $12 million. And Uncle Floyd, he was upset because he actually had to pay for lawyers and shell out a bit of money to defend himself.
I love Uncle Floyd. Is he still around?
Yeah, he's in a nursing home in New Jersey. He's not doing well, but his brother Jimmy's in touch with him, goes to visit him a bit. Jimmy Vivino. Yeah, he's still kicking.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that that's who Jimmy was.
Yeah, that's Jimmy. Jimmy's older brother is Floyd. There were 3 Vivino brothers.
Oh, I didn't know that. I had no idea.
Jimmy, of course, is the band leader. He had another brother. The other brother
from
was
our private group.
Yeah, the other brother was a musician in Conan's band as well.
Right. I had no idea.
And then, of course, Floyd, was host of the Uncle Floyd Show and has that part in the Robin Williams film, Next Stop Vietnam.
Moscow on the Hudson?
Yeah. But he's still around.
I love Uncle Floyd or Svengoolie now. I love that it's still on and it's like entry-level television. It's like, you can do this.
It's refreshing. It's refreshing. That Svengoolie is popular, and shows like the kind of films we want to watch usually.
Yeah.
But when
he's the only reason I still have a dish.
But I feel, I agree. I feel connected to those guys, especially when I met, I did a signing with Uncle Floyd a couple of years ago in New York, and we spent an hour only talking about Sammy Petrillo.
Sure.
That's it. That's all we talked about. Not just Bela Lugosi meets the Brooklyn Gorilla, but other things too. The other films he was in and meeting him and dealing with, it was so refreshing. It was I had such a good feeling about that.
Yeah. When I met Gilbert, we were both filming a thing for Fox a show called the Sunday Comics, and we were filming a sketch or something. And I was very intimidated. Like I didn't even want to say anything to him because he was a big, to me, he was in Letterman all the time. And I was, a nobody. And I sat down and I made a Dwight Fry reference to somebody else in the room, and his head like ratcheted around.
Yeah.
And because I didn't know he was a monster kid. And that was it. We were off and running.
Oh, sure,
it was like 4 hours.
Yeah. I connected with him early on, like as soon as we realized we loved old monster films in the early 80s. When he was like, after he was on SNL, but, we just like connected. And he would come over to my apartment in New York. I talk about this in the film, in the documentary, just to watch my VHS collection of old shitty horror films, with Lon Chaney Jr. or Bela Lugosi or Tor Johnson. Because he didn't have a VHS, he didn't have a VCR, because he was legendarily cheap. So he didn't have one. This is already mid-'80s. He didn't have one, so he'd come by unannounced and sit there for hours and watch these films. Sometimes I wouldn't watch with him because I had a deadline, so I'd sit at my desk. And it would just be in silence, and then I'd put his coat on him and send him home. But my wife Kathy would come.
Your wife says that you zipped up his parka for him.
Well, yeah, it's like she'd come home from work at like 5, and he'd still be sitting there, and she didn't really know him that well. Kind of knew who he was, and she says, "What's he doing here?" I said, "He's just watching The Manster." What can I tell you?
What else would he be doing here?
Of course. It's like, because his mom lived about 2 blocks from us in the East Village. So he'd visit his mom and then stop by my apartment on the way home and, basically sit there in silence. And I'd just put one on after another for him, the crawling eye or, the Attack of the Crab Monsters or The Manster or Quentin Strangler.
Just keep him happy.
It's like, and then he'd have it and then he'd go home. I think he lived on the West Side. I miss those days, but I put Gilbert on the cover of my book, Schtick Figures, of course. It's my little tribute to him. And the book is also dedicated to him and Freddie Roman and Freddie's son, Alan Kirschenbaum.
Who I knew
who sadly passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So, it's like it all ties in,
Yeah. Freddie's not with us anymore.
No, he died a couple of years ago.
But he outlived Alan.
Yeah, sadly he did, and he was brokenhearted. It kind of ruined his life. His life was. But Freddie called me when my first old Jewish comedian book came out. He called me. He was with the Friars. He was their abbot. So he called me out of the blue. He said he saw the book. He loved it. He wanted to throw me a party at the Friars. I said, "Oh, that would be terrific, of course." And he said, "Drew, I have one question." He said, "In this book, I'm opposite a guy named Larry Fine. Who is that?" I go, "Oh, well, he was one of the Three Stooges." It's a different world. Even though they were both comedians in the world of comedy, Freddie didn't know that Larry Fine, who he was, or that he was a Stooge. Yeah.
Because he was just up in the Catskills, or
he was like a New York Catskills guy. Yeah, it's like and also he was a shoe salesman originally. He got into comedy a little later because he was a funny guy. He was a funny shoe salesman. Somebody must have said, you should really go into show business.
I had no idea.
Yeah. So Freddie didn't. I thought that was refreshing. He didn't know who Larry Fine. I explained it to him, and he was fine with it. But he threw me a party at the Friars with, and then Jerry Lewis picked up on the book too and loved it and started calling me a few times, and then he threw me a really big party at the Friars, which was a thrill. So
Jerry was not thrown by your depictions of him.
No, and I was very nervous too because I illustrated the Spy magazine article about Day the Clown Cried. So I was in fear
it's a hot Jerry topic as of late.
That somebody would, of course, somebody would say to Jerry, Drew Friedman's that guy who did the illustrations for that piece in Spy that you hated, and I heard he hated it, and disputed Harry Shearer and all that stuff. Right. But Joe, no, I lived in fear about Jerry, discovering that. And also I was so careful when Jerry would call me, he would say, "Drew, what are you working on?" He was more interested in what I was doing. And I would talk to him and I would make sure not to bring up a couple of subjects. Don't bring up Dean Martin. Don't bring up Abby Greshler, his original agent who he hated. And don't bring up Sammy Petrillo. And I understand the Sammy Petrillo thing.
The Dean, I didn't know that Dean was that hot of a subject with Jerry.
This is the thing, I had heard that if people would bring up Dean and Jerry would explode or end the conversation. And of course, don't bring up Dave the Clown Cried.
Right.
But my friend Dave Abramson is writing a biography of Sammy Petrillo. He's been working on it for the last 12 years. It's going to be incredible when it comes out. But I said to Dave, it's like
the Johnson documentaries.
I can't wait for this book, and hopefully I'll do the cover art for it. I'm not sure, but
Sammy
Scott
Petrello,
Alexander already
Master
wrote
of the Senate.
Scott Alexander already wrote the forward to it.
Okay.
But Dave interviewed Sammy at length, early on before Sammy died, and he interviewed a lot of other people who worked with Sammy. But I thought, he should really talk to Jerry Lewis. That would just be that would just be so amazing, just to get the guy that Sammy imitated.
Right.
So
but who also Milton
hired Sammy.
But Milton Berle discovered Sammy.
Well, so he claims, but Jerry claims he discovered him on the street on 54th Street outside 30 Rock or whatever.
Yeah.
He saw this kid. I saw this kid, and he was doing me, and I brought him up to meet Dean, and then we used him on the show. He has his own version, which might be true. We don't know, but. Yeah, so I gave Sammy his big break. He put him on the Colgate Comedy Hour. He's on there for 5 seconds. He plays his little brother. Or his baby. He pops his head out of a suitcase, doesn't say anything. He's dubbed. That was it. And then he broke off, of course, and did Brooklyn Gorilla. But I got my nerve up and Jerry called me about something, and I said, Jerry, I have a favor to ask you. I said, my friend Dave, the journalist Dave Abrahamson, is writing a book about Sammy Petrello, and he would love to talk to you. Jerry paused, and he goes, why would anybody write a book about Sammy Petrello? I said, well, it's just Shakespearean. This guy who was obsessed with you, who wanted to be you, and then he turned against you. And, it's and then he went on to have this long career in strip clubs, etc. And Jerry thought about it. He said, yes, I will talk to him. So Dave got to talk to Jerry for a few minutes and got some great quotes and stuff. So so this book is going to be amazing.
The interesting thing about the Day the Clown Cried documentary is that Jerry had this epiphany that it was terrible.
Yeah.
He was like, this isn't good.
He came around to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is one of those things where you watch it and you go, what were you thinking?
Patton was right. He said that kind of ruined that documentary. The fact that Jerry was dismissing it as a piece of shit. It's so where's the fun now?
Where's the fun? Yeah. My friend Matt Weinhold, who's has a podcast called Monster Party, which is about old monster movies. Mm-hmm. And he was talking to George Takei about Shatner's spoken word albums. And he said, didn't he have any friends to tell him this isn't really a great idea? And George Takei went, Bill? Friends?
That's great. That's great. I think Jerry, Milton Berle was originally supposed to be in The Day the Clown Cried in the mid-'60s. He was going to do it with Veronica Lake as his wife. It was an article. I sent it to Larry and Scott and I think the gang. But yeah, he was slated to do it in the mid-'60s. It didn't happen. So my guess is that
was Veronica Lake still around in the mid-'60s?
Yeah, she died in the, I think, early 70s.
Yeah.
But she was she was only 40-something, early 40s. But, she was, she hadn't been in a film for 10 years. But that was the plan. And that of course, didn't happen. Milton Berle, of course, went on to be in the Oscar at the same time.
Right. Written by Harlan Ellison.
That's right. His first film. Yeah. Which is, that's a pretty fascinating film, too. So Bad It's Bad. But,
so Bad It's Bad.
Yeah, well, Tony Bennett is Jaime Cohn, I think, or Jaime. Yeah, it's
yeah. The Oscar was the late great Andy Paley's favorite movie. That was okay. Andy loved the Oscar.
I talked to Harlan Ellison once, shortly before he died, and I'm pretty sure I brought it up, and he didn't have much to say about it. He said, "Oh, it was early on." He was asking about my father because my father was writing for Hollywood in the late '60s as well. So he changed he quickly changed the subject. But,
that's great. Well, The Beat Generation was written by Richard Matheson.
Wow. That's hard to believe, yeah. And Joe Heller wrote an episode of McHale's Navy. Did you know that? Yeah, he did. After Catch 22.
Was that the one where McHale tries to get out of the Navy because he says he doesn't want to kill people, and they say, well, that proves that you're sane.
How great that would be. Yeah.
If everything he did was just Catch 22. Yeah, he also wrote a Waltons, where John Boyd did.
But yeah. But What were we talking about just a second ago? Oh, we were talking about Jerry? No. Oh, why Jerry did the Day of the Clown cried.
Yeah.
I think Milton Berle passed that project on to him. So in Jerry's head, well, if it was going to be good enough for Milton Berle, it's good enough for me.
Right.
And then he got the ball rolling and all that Swedish money and whatnot, and the rest is history.
Dr. Z's Trailers from Hell dropped today, where he talks about One More Time, the vaunted sequel to Salt and Pepper.
Wow,
directed by Jerry Lewis.
I have a one sheet of that too. Jack Davis did the art.
Oh, okay. I believe it was one of the only movies that Jerry directed that he wasn't in.
It might have been the only one. He directed an episode of Ben Casey. I know that. And it might have been the only actual feature he directed that he wasn't in. I think so. I guess as a favor to Peter Lawford or Sammy or whatnot.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine Jerry Lewis directing Christopher Lee as Dracula, but that happened.
Yeah, but I have a one sheet of
Chris!
that. I'm probably the only person who has a one sheet of that's actually hanging up in his studio. One more time.
Why didn't you want to see him in Damn Yankees?
Jerry, maybe it was too slick. I was never a fan of that show. You know, the movie's okay with Ray Walston in that role.
Right.
I guess I'm never a fan of the music in that show, and I didn't want to be disappointed. And no, I just was not interested for whatever reason. You know, it's like, you know, I got to meet him and I got to go out to he invited Kathy and I to Las Vegas. So I spent time with him there. It's the period when Belzer was like connected to him pretty much.
Yeah.
I think Belzer at that point was calling him dad. As weird as that was.
No, it's weird. I was going to mention this person 4 seconds ago. When Belzer moved to France, all these people moved to France.
Yeah.
And my friend Kevin Rooney also bought a house there.
I knew Kevin.
And a lot of people, Kevin was incredibly influential to me.
He had an amazing mind.
Yeah. A bullwhip. And really kind of made my career, plucked me out of obscurity. And when I moved to LA, he just took me around town and introduced me to everybody. It was like being a made guy.
Huh. I miss him as well.
Yeah. I never auditioned at the Improv. Kevin just took me into the Improv and said, "Hey bud, this is my friend Dana. He's really funny. But I said, call in for spots."
That's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah. Yeah. He was, and brutally funny. But yeah, once they go to France, like, I ain't going back there. They want to stay. So, but because there aren't magazines anymore, do you just work on, do you just do books and?
Well, yeah, for the last couple of years.
You get hired to do things?
No, usually I turn things down. You know, there aren't really magazines anymore, which is fine by me. I don't want to do any more assignments because I really started to dislike that whole process. You know, I'm working on bucket list pieces now, like things that a lot of that is in Schtick Figures in the new book. There's people I've never drawn before, like I'd never drawn Lenny Bruce before or there's like a few of them in there. And so I'm finally going to, spend as much time as I want, a couple of weeks, in some cases, and just like bucket list things. Like, I want to draw Lenny, I want to do a beautiful Lenny Bruce portrait. So I did, so that's my thinking now, so.
You know what you need to do? I'm sure you hear that every day. You know what you should do? But one of my favorite weird things is, early 70s Jufro Rod Serling.
Oh, wow. I just drew him, but I drew him in the early 60s, actual hair Rod Serling.
Is that in Schtick Figures or?
Yeah, he's in there. He's in there.
Okay.
He's in there.
I have it right there. I have to look.
I believe he's in there.
I have that painting too.
It might be post Schtick Figures, I'm sorry to say, but maybe he's not in there. But yeah, that what he had on his head in the early 70s was pretty incredible. Especially by by the time they were filming him for Night Gallery.
Yeah, it was really like Marty Allen trying to comb it down.
Yeah, it's just like he just went too far with that. There are examples of that. Like, come on, who are you kidding? You told the story of Bob Guccione in the hospital.
Yes,
that's great. I've quoted that a few times. Like, Jessel too. Like wore that, and he would wear it lopsided. And somebody's mentioned, like, Georgie, your toupee is lopsided. And he goes, I know, it gets more attention that way. You know, he had to figure it out.
Do those guys go home at night? Fooled them again.
I guess so. I guess so. You know, it's like the hair dye is bad enough, but the guys with the giant wigs, it's fascinating. That could be a book. Yes, that could be my next book.
My ex-wife, who was the one in the hospital across the hall from Bob Guccione, calls that hair dye Catskill Copper. Is the name of that. When Jack Carter tries to dye his hair brown again, and it just is that weird.
Wow. You know, I just Googled pictures of him recently. I mean, before he died, and boy, his eyes are going in different directions and whatnot. With this old Jewish comedian book, I want to redo a couple of people that I didn't think I quite got right. And Jack Carter was one of them. And he hated the drawing I did of him, which is not why I'm redoing him, but you know, back when I did those books, there was no Google images. You could, so I had what I had. I had a few clippings of those guys, so that's what I used. But now there's
great. Am I wrong in thinking you did a great Leo G. Carroll?
I don't think I've done him. You know, I don't know why. I can't explain why, but no,
he's not in Any Persons.
Did I do him? No, I don't think I've ever done him. From Man from Uncle, no.
Yeah.
The Tarantula, no.
Tarantula. I thought that was from the Tarantula.
No, didn't do him. You're thinking of somebody else.
Yeah. Well, there's Rondo. Who's the other guy? There's Rondo Hatton, and then there's another guy that had acromegaly.
Oh, well, you know, like Paul Benedict, they said had it, the guy who played the neighbor in the Jeffersons. He had a little more mild case. No, there were a few guys who had it.
It was an earlier version. He had like a crew cut, like a 50s, 60s guy. I'll think of his, because you drew him in a panel with Rondo Hatton, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I know. What he was, I think, a wrestler. Like, yeah, that guy. I forget his name offhand, but yeah, I drew him. Yeah, he might have suffered. A few of those guys had that disease back then. Yeah. Those wrestlers.
The weird thing about it is, like, Rondo Hatton was a handsome football player, wanted to be an actor, couldn't get work. Then he developed a horrible disfiguring disease and he got work.
Yeah, well, you know, got gassed in World War I. It's a sad ending, but he became a movie star.
He became a movie star. Yeah, he was the creeper.
He was like an articulate. Did you read the biography of him? It's great. I did the cover for it.
No, I didn't.
Came out a couple of years ago. It's worth checking out. Yeah,
I'll write that down because I love that. I think that story's fascinating.
Yeah, get right to Amazon. There was a documentary they put out about him maybe a year or two ago, which I couldn't really get through.
Yeah.
I think the author of the Rondo book is Scott Galinghouse. I think that's his name. And it's a Bear Manor book, but they did a great job on it. Get right to Amazon.
We got to get that. We got to get that Forey Ackerman book going.
I agree.
I've got some stories. Did you ever go to the Acker Mansion?
I never went there. You know, that's I guess a slight regret. But I think by the time I was going out to Hollywood on a regular basis, people had picked it clean anyway. You know, I heard people were walking in there and walking out with piles of stuff.
It was insane. It was insane. Yeah, I went to both of them. The saddest one was when he was older. He was not well, and I went to see him. And it was like he was sitting in the thing, and it was like, he goes, I can't get up. And he's like, he goes, I got burned in the bathtub. Okay.
I did go to the auction when they auctioned off all his possessions in New York at the Puck Building. Did you get anything? On Housden Street. And I went there and just went through everything, including Bela Lugosi's scrapbooks were there. And, I really, I had no money at the time, but I was like, oh my God, to own these. And the scrapbooks, Bela chronicled everything in his career up until the Ed Wood stuff. Even it's just like he didn't miss a beat. But I remember it was in the Puck Building in the lobby. And so, and Spy Magazine was also in the Puck Building on the top floor. So I went through all that stuff, went up to Spy and talked to Graydon Carter. I said, boy, that Forrest Ackerman auction down there is amazing. And he looked at me and goes, who? He had no idea what I was talking about. Different world.
Graydon Carter, who looked at Bozo and thought, that's a good hairstyle.
Perfect analogy.
What is your brother doing now?
Well, I think he's writing. I'm not sure he's doing anything involving music now, but he's right. He continues to write. And my younger brother Kip is a photographer, and we're still at it.
Yeah,
but I'm slowing down. By choice.
By choice.
Yeah, I want to enjoy life. I want to enjoy talking to you. So it's like,
well, again, it's like what I was saying about when I started to hang out with writers is like. I'd love to make movies. I also like to go to them.
Yeah.
I like hanging out. I like having fun and goofing off with my friends.
That's the thing. Yeah. I'm there. I like to relax, enjoy. I like to read biographies of people I admire.
Yeah.
And just hang out and go in the back in the garden and rake and do things like that.
Yeah. You don't live in the city anymore?
No, we're in the country. Catherine and I live in the country in Pennsylvania. Well, this is a secret, but we live in rural Pennsylvania with our beagle and, so enjoying the simple things in life.
It was good because living in Pennsylvania, you don't have to endure a lot of political ads during the election.
Oh, not at all. Not at all. We don't have any Trump voters around here. It's great. No MAGA signs in this area. But, where we live, we're close enough to New York. So, it's easy to get into. But
is it just jump a train in New York?
No, I still drive, but there are buses. And then we're close enough to Philadelphia where we have relatives. And, we're in a nice location where it's close enough to this or that. So, but we like leaving the city more than going.
Yeah, I do too. But I've always been that way about New York. I always, after 3 or 4 days, I'm like, it's too much.
I feel that way too. But, my father died a couple of years ago and I would go in every couple of months to visit him and spend time with him. Also, Joe Franklin died and Abe Vigoda. It's just, to me, it's not the same city anymore.
Yeah, LA is not the same city either. It was,
well, once you lost Skippy Lowe, it's like.
Even as recently as we were watching Pulp Fiction the other day, which is one of my wife's favorite movies. And, all my friends were in that movie. Mm-hmm. I was around when that was happening. And Kathy Griffin is in that movie. And Quentin was around. And that was kind of like the period where me and my group, like Janine and then Ben Stiller and other, we were the cool kids in show business for 18 months. Mm. That was that period of time. It's a totally different place now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like 30 years ago, but it was just like, it's good.
The first time I went to LA in 1968 for the first time. My dad was hired to write the screenplay for Owl and the Pussycat. So they put him up at the Beverly Hills Hotel and he took me. He would take periodically, he'd scoop up my brothers to take one of us to Las Vegas or Los Angeles. So he took me to LA. So I was 9 years old. So we went to visit Ray Stark's house, and which had been Humphrey Bogart's house previously, and I think Chaplin's house. And then we went to Columbia.
That was the house where the term the Rat Pack was coined.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Laura McCall came downstairs and saw them all drinking and said, look at you sitting around like a pack of rats.
Oh, wow. I remember I went through Ray Stark's library, and he was charming. He was nice and stuff. And I saw they had the Carlos Clarence book on the history of horror movies. Yes. And I couldn't believe that he had that, because I had that book too. So I just felt so, like at home.
I know.
Oh my God. And it was a new book at the time, but also 68. So we went out to Columbia Pictures, and I remember walking around the set of Marooned. They had the big moon there. So I just walked around the set
James Franciscus.
And then watched them film Cactus Flower with Walter Matthau and Goldie Hawn and Ingrid Bergman, who looked so bored. She wanted to get it over with. It's like memories like that.
What are you doing, Ingrid? A Walter Matthau Western.
She couldn't wait to get out of there. She was like the secretary. She was sitting at a desk, and she was like, you could see in her face, she was unapproachable and so bored.
That was my favorite, that period of time. We were watching, it begins with an H. Walter Matthau's a cop. What's it? Has that weird airplane chase in it?
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah. Just that he was
it was a name. Was it Charlie Varick or no?
Charlie Varick.
Okay.
Charlie Varick. Thank you. And there was a period of time where Walter Matthau walks in the store and this one's like, well, hello. Wait a minute.
Yeah, something was off.
No woman finds him attractive.
Glenda Jackson somehow did, or in that movie anyway. But I don't know. That was quite a time.
It's the same in the Maltese Falcon when he goes into the bookstore and she's like, well, hello.
Well, I think he lowers his glasses and he's a little nerdy in that scene.
Yeah. Well, no, and then he goes into the other one later. And I think he sees Dorothy Lamour is the other.
Okay.
Yeah. And she's like, I'll close the shop.
Yeah. So I'm spoiled as far as going, but Los Angeles, I still enjoy it. I haven't been out. Actually, the last time I was out was the last time I saw you in 2017.
Wow,
before COVID. Then
yeah.
COVID slowed everything down. So, but I should be coming out in a couple of months. So
excellent. I can't wait.
I look forward to seeing you and a few other old friends who I miss. So
yeah,
that should be fun.
Well, and you'll be coming at it for your film, the Vermeer of the Borscht Belt, which look for it soon, and the book Schtick Figures, and so many more. Just go to Amazon, Drew Friedman, and if you don't have any, you'll want them all.
Thanks for coming to our show tonight. We appreciate the opportunity to serve you. We think it's great to be able to enjoy fine entertainment in the comfort and privacy of your own car. The come-as-you-are atmosphere is a pleasant way to relax in the evening. Don't you agree?
They're true tales from Weirdsville. Tales from Weirdsville. And they're true.
Can your heart stand the shocking facts?
Andy Griffith was born in Mount Airy, North Carolina in 1926. He was raised a Southern Baptist and originally studied to be a Moravian preacher. Moravian preachers are preachers from a Protestant sect that primarily do missionary work. Now, this desire of Andy's lasted well into college, but at some point, he switched his major to music and became a part of the school's drama club. After graduation, he became a high school music and drama teacher down in North Carolina. Now, he could have stayed there, taught for the rest of his life, retired quietly, and we would have never known who Andy Griffith was. But he also started writing and performing these little monologues. This was a hybrid form of stand-up comedy, funny character monologues. And one he did, which was of a very naive country preacher seeing a football game for the first time and trying to describe it to his flock, was made into a record and became a big hit.
It was that both bunches full of them men wanted this funny-looking little pumpkin to play with. They did, and I know friends that they couldn't eat it because they kicked it the whole evening and it never busted.
This was in 1954, and Andy Griffith, North Carolina high school drama teacher, had the number 9 record on the charts in the country, and he wasn't even singing. In 1955, he starred in a 1-hour play for television, No Time for Sergeants, where he played Whale Stockdale. No Time for Sergeants tells the story of a man so simple, he's smart. A country rube adrift in the military. Now, Andy Griffith would later take this premise, when he was a big TV star, and turn it into a spin-off of his series, The Andy Griffith Show, as Gomer Pyle, USMC. Fun fact. Gomer Pyle was one of the most popular comedies on television in the late 1960s and early 1970s. Anyway, back to our story. No Time for Sergeants was a hit, and in 1956 it was expanded and put on stage on Broadway, and Andy Griffith, in the lead role, got a Tony nomination. Bud Schulberg was a Nepo baby. His father was a movie producer, B.P. Schulberg, and his mother, Adeline Jaffe, later Adeline Schulberg, founded a talent agency. In 1931, when Schulberg was 17, his parents divorced, and his father ran off with actress Sylvia Sidney, who was quite a hottie in her day, and would later, towards the end of her life, gain fame again as Juno, the chain-smoking afterlife bureaucrat in the original Beetlejuice. Schulberg went to Dartmouth, where he studied writing for the Dartmouth Jack-o'-lantern, the university's humor magazine, and after graduation he joined World War II, which was a very popular war going on at the time. Schulberg worked in the Office of Strategic Services, which is where the Army tended to put showbiz people. He was on a documentary film unit headed by film director John Ford, recording the Nazi atrocities at liberated concentration camps. Another assignment for Schulberg was being part of the team that arrested Triumph of the Will director Leni Riefenstahl. Now, the initial reason they wanted Riefenstahl was that they wanted her to identify the faces of Nazi soldiers in propaganda footage. After Germany lost the war, a lot of the German officers lost their uniforms and just became innocent civilians. I don't know, I'm a plumber. Get me out of here. When confronted with the footage of the liberated concentration camps, Riefenstahl denied any knowledge. According to Schulberg, quote, "She gave me the usual song and dance. She said, 'Of course, I'm really so misunderstood. I'm not political.'" Because Bud Schulberg was raised in show business, his writing was often about show business. His 1941 novel, What Makes Sammy Run, is a masterpiece. Amoral film exec Sammy Glick will do and say anything to get ahead in the business without a glimmer of guilt or self-awareness. It is a story of Jewish assimilation into WASP society at all costs, and it is still as relevant now as it was in 1941. In 1950, Schulberg wrote The Disenchanted, about a young screenwriter who collaborates on a project with a famous novelist. That novelist turns out to be a broken, tragic figure with whom the young writer becomes, dare I say, disenchanted. And this is supposedly about when Schulberg was in college and collaborated on a project with F. Scott Fitzgerald, who was, by that time, a titanic booze bag. One day, Bud Schulberg was talking to his friend Will Rogers Jr. Now, Will Rogers Jr. was the son of Will Rogers Sr., and Will Rogers Sr. was one of the most famous men in America. Will Rogers Sr. coined the phrase, "I'd never met a man I didn't like," although that's not actually what he said. He also coined the phrase, "I'm not a member of any organized political party, I'm a Democrat." Will Rogers was an affable everyman. He was a humorist, he was a singer, he was a guitar-strumming storyteller par excellence. Speaking to a young Schulberg, Will Rogers Jr. said about his famous father, "He's so full of shit. He pretends he's just one of the people, just one of the guys." The character of a smiling, affable everyman who was completely full of shit appealed to Bud Schulberg, as it would, eventually, to Elia Kazan. Elia Kazan was born in what is now Istanbul, came to America in 1913 when he was 4 years old, wanted to become an actor, studied at the Yale School of Drama and Juilliard, became involved with the group theater, which focused on plays with social and political messages. Kazan felt a deep sense of belonging in the world of radical leftist experimental theater. He became close with other luminaries involved with the group theater, acting guru Lee Strasberg, playwright Cliff Odets. Although he began his career intending to become an actor, it was as a director that Kazan really found his calling. He directed Thornton Wilder's The Skin of Our Teeth. He then directed Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, then Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. Kazan founded the Actors Studio in 1947, brought in Lee Strasberg as its creative director, and here, Strasberg introduced the acting style of the method, which was a chunky gumbo of Stanislavski's teachings. The method revolutionized acting in America, in theater and on film. It changed the way actors acted. They stopped having that flowery, theatrical, presentational style you see in so many movies in the 30s. "Oh, darling, can't you see I love you?" And turned it into what you see with Marlon Brando in A Streetcar Named Desire. It was derisively called T-shirt acting by old-school theatrical types. The method was an attempt to emulate genuine human behavior. Elia Kazan was by now one of the preeminent stage directors in the American theater. Hollywood beckoned. But following the socially relevant tradition of the group theater, Kazan's first feature-length directorial effort was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, Betty Smith's semi-autobiographical story of growing up poor and disadvantaged in urban America, not the kind of thing you saw on screen a lot in the late 40s and early 50s. That was followed up by Gentleman's Agreement, which was about the still not very discussed topic of the unspoken anti-Semitism that existed in white-collar America. In 1951, Kazan directed the cinematic adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire with Brando, Vivian Leigh, Carl Malden, Kim Hunter. That film was nominated for 12 Oscars. It won 4. He followed that up with Viva Zapata, then On the Waterfront, which was nominated for 12 Oscars and won 8. including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, then East of Eden, giving a then unknown young method actor named James Dean his first big break. All of Kazan's films had some sort of social currency, a message, a statement. They were morality plays. In late 1956, Kazan set about working on a new project. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of a new invention in American homes: television. Specifically, the potential effects that television could have on our politics. What if a politician came along who was utterly amoral and corrupt, but was so charismatic, who so understood the medium of television that people supported him anyway? Believe it or not, there was a time when that was an actual question. It was a question that Kazan's On the Waterfront screenwriter Bud Schulberg thought about as well. Remember his friend Will Rogers Jr.'s assessment of his dad? Schulberg had written a collection of short stories called Some Faces in the Crowd. And one of those stories, Your Arkansas Traveler, told the tale of a very Will Rogers-like character named Lonesome Rhodes. Lonesome Rhodes was a folksy spinner of tall tales, a down-home font of entertaining, folksy wisdom, the common clay of the American culture. Kazan and Schulberg set about turning that story into a film, basing Lonesome Rhodes partly on Will Rogers, and more specifically, on Arthur Godfrey. Who? Exactly. All but forgotten now, barely a show business footnote. Arthur Godfrey was, in his day, one of the biggest stars in America. At his peak, in the early 50s, between radio, which was then the preeminent form of in-home entertainment, and television, which was new but on its way up, Arthur Godfrey's voice and face were in American homes 6 days a week. His programs included Arthur Godfrey Time, which was on Monday to Friday morning on radio and television. Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, which was on Monday evenings on radio and television. Arthur Godfrey and His Friends, Wednesday evenings on television. The Arthur Godfrey Digest, Friday evenings on radio. And King Arthur Godfrey and His Round Table, Sunday afternoons on radio. Arthur Godfrey was unavoidable. He was an affable, chuckling, ukulele-strumming everyman. And hey, guess what? Off camera, he was an egomaniacal asshole. This, of course, almost goes without saying. Often, not always, but often. The thing that drives people to inordinate success, people like Arthur Godfrey and certain politicians or wealthy, influential South Afrikaners, is insecurity. Arthur Godfrey was no exception. And the cardinal sin to working with Arthur Godfrey was that no one got to be more successful or beloved than Arthur Godfrey. So much so that the other performers on his show were called Little Godfreys. No need for Freud here. Julius LaRosa was one of the most popular Little Godfreys and, as such, had a bullseye on his back. He was a singer, and he had the audacity to have a hit record without Godfrey's help. One of the other requirements of being a Little Godfrey was mandatory dancing lessons, and LaRosa missed one due to a family emergency. But Godfrey punished him anyway, banning him from appearing on the show for a day. Now with his hit record under his belt and feeling like, an adult, LaRosa hired an agent, Tommy Rockwell, who informed Godfrey that, look, if you have a problem with LaRosa, talk to me. Don't talk to LaRosa directly. So, Godfrey fired LaRosa on the air. Somewhat miraculously, the audience actually saw LaRosa's firing for what it was: the petty vindictive flex of a petty vindictive man. And Arthur Godfrey's image and his ratings took the hit. Never one to learn a lesson, Godfrey would go on to fire other Little Godfreys in a similar manner. Over the next 2 years, he fired over 20 cast and crew members. Now, Godfrey never got canceled with a bang, as we would say, but he did wither away with a whimper, going from the master of all he surveyed to just another guy with a radio show. And so, in the hands of Schulberg and Kazan, Arthur Godfrey became Lonesome Rhodes, the strummin', tail-spinnin', wisecrackin' sage of real America. Now, the trick to casting the role of a popular celebrity who's charming and funny is you have to find someone believable when they're being charming and funny. If there is one thing that annoys me as a comedian, it's when you have a movie about a comedian. And in the movie, the comedian is on stage and he's getting laughs, usually crazy, insane, uproarious, table-slapping laughs. But the bits that they're doing are not at all funny. Not in the way a comedian is funny. Not in the way a comedian gets laughs. Look at Sally Field in the movie Punchline, or Dustin Hoffman in the movie Lenny. Two brilliant actors playing comedians, but in their scenes on stage, they are not funny. Tom Hanks, who also plays a comedian in Punchline, and who is funny in the way that a comedian is funny, but his material in Punchline sucks, and it would not get the laughs he's getting. And all of this takes you out of the movie. Elia Kazan, for what it's worth, was not going to take that chance. So for Lonesome Rhodes, he went and cast someone who was folksy, charming, affable, warm, funny, and exactly the way Lonesome Rhodes was. A young actor just making a name for himself on Broadway in the play No Time for Sergeants, Andy Griffith. Kazan met with Griffith not to see if he could convincingly play Rhodes on screen, but to see if he could convincingly play the insecure, egomaniacal, power-tripping asshole that Lonesome Rhodes was off-screen. And Andy Griffith nailed it.
In your ratings this morning? 53.7. Just picked up another million. This whole country's just like my flock of sheep. Rednecks, crackers, hillbillies, housefrows, shut-ins, pea pickers. Everybody that's got to jump when somebody else blows the whistle. They don't know it yet, but they're all gonna be fighters for Fuller. They're mine. I own them. They think like I do. Only they're even more stupid than I am, so I gotta think for them.
A Face in the Crowd takes Lonesome Rhodes from a hungover drifter in a drunk tank jail cell to an influential TV and radio star hawking, get this, vitamin supplements. Sound familiar? And this is 1957. He's then brought in to lend some human appeal to a stodgy conservative politician, giving him a cute nickname and inculcating him with voters. Yes, even our politics could be corrupted with the right amount of wit and charm. Lonesome is eventually the instrument of his own undoing, as is usually the case. At the story's conclusion, a young Walter Matthau has the honor of summing up the film's moral. It is, in retrospect, a little naive.
Well, if I come in him in that jail and pick it.
Marcia, stop it. You were taken in just like we were all taken in. Well, we get wise to him. That's our strength.
Uh-huh. Sure it is.
Observe the laws of your city, state, and nation. They exist to protect the rights and freedoms of everyone. America, my land, your land. But will it always remain America the Beautiful? Pollution, a threat to life and health, not to mention one of our greatest natural resources, the scenic beauty of our land. must all pitch in to clean up our country before it's too late. America the Beautiful depends on you.
And now, on with the show.
Hey everybody, it's Dana. I wanted to interrupt the podcast with a little note about the interview you're about to hear. Kurt and I recorded this interview in very late December. This episode was supposed to come out in January, and then we had to evacuate, etc., etc. So you're about to hear me make some comments about the Santa Anas and how windy it is and how terrible that is when there's a fire. This was several weeks before the terrible fires that ravaged Los Angeles. So if I sound somewhat flippant about it, it's because I don't have the gift of foresight. Additionally, you'll hear later in the interview, we're talking about David Lynch, like a lot of people on podcasts are this month. But we're not talking about how sad we were when we heard that he died, because at the time we recorded it, he was still with us. So those are two things that you're going to hear that might sound strange, but instead of cutting it or whatever, I thought just let you know what's going on, and there you have it. And now let's go back to the podcast action. It is a windy-ass day high atop the Mulholland Drive view shelf here in sunny Southern California. You know, everything in California, it's everything's bigger. You know, you can't just have a wind. We're in a wind advisory, a wind alert. When the Santa Ana winds, you get these weird hot winds, and if there's a fire, they go everywhere, and that's what we're. So it's a nice apocalyptic day. I was driving my daughter to school this morning and saw two birds trying to fly, and they were just kind of hovering, like, what the hell is going on? But my guest today is a good friend of mine, a terrific producer. You might have seen his work, especially if you are a fan of the genre, the horror sci-fi genre, and you watch Shudder. He has a new special that just dropped on Shudder on December 31st, the last gasp of 2024, before we head in to the sunny climes of 2025. Called Horror's Greatest, which examines different elements of different types of genre. He's also an old punker and a good buddy. Please welcome Kurt Sayenga.
This is the sound of my voice.
Here's my question. Horror's Greatest, you're covering what is like isolating different kinds of horror movies, and you examine genre films, and then you get people that are big in the genre, and they talk about them. You've been very kind to include me on a lot of these. Horror's Greatest has David Dostmalshin, Mick Garris, a lot of people from my Rolodex, Joe Hill. Yeah. Where did these things are so watchable? Because what they do is, and I want to know if this was intentional or not. It's like scrolling, but the show does it for you. So where otherwise people channel surf or they scroll, the show is designed to scroll for you.
Yeah, it's designed to keep moving forward.
Yeah.
And also to play within the restrictions of fair use, which necessitates a certain forward progression under 3 minutes. Yeah.
Oh, is that what it is? So yeah. So tell me how you get this idea for the special, and you go into Shudder, or do you go to and what do you say? Well, how do you sell this?
In this case, I'd made a series for Shudder called The 101 Scariest Horror Movie Moments of All Time.
Right.
Not my title, but very descriptive.
Yeah.
Which Shudder actually came to me basically with because I had done Eli Roth's History of Horror for 3 seasons before that. So, and they wanted to do something except unhosted and therefore less expensive. And so, so I put that together, and that to fit 101 things in 8 episodes, I think, was quite a lot. But it does get you in a certain groove. And taking that concept, they wanted to do something else that would be broader, basically, that could be a continuing series.
Right.
So thus, this idea, which was essentially just something to celebrate the genre in different ways, look at different parts of it for different people, but not necessarily be so confined to just this one specific idea that's locked into time.
Yeah, it can skate around.
Yeah, so basically, I came up with about 40 different topics, and sent it in, and then Shudder said, "Okay, this one of these," and then we kind of batted around from there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there have always been shows like this. And before there was TV, there were movies like this. There, that there would, the Broadway stars of 1952, like there were and then remember the show That's Hollywood.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was, and then there was one that was specifically about MGM, I believe.
Was That's Entertainment was the movies, those 3 movies, I think were all MGM. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So it definitely is in that kind of feeling. It's like people who are in the industry and people who observe it commenting on it. But what I'm trying to get at really is what people love about it.
Right.
So that's a big part of the show. A big part of the series is sort of staying away from hardcore criticism of it and more going into things that people like. Because one thing I've discovered in making these shows is every single film ever made has a super fan. Doesn't matter how bleak or awful you think the film is, somebody out there loves it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And part of my job is, I think, talking to people and finding out what it is that they do like about these things, which are not necessarily, things that I like. There are many films in this series which, are not the first thing I would go to, but other people do. And I want to know what it is that appeals to them about it.
And the reason that people like them could be completely unrelated to the quality of the movie. It could be like, why do you love this movie so much? Because I watched it when I was 6 with my brother. And it's just like, and it means
which
a
is
lot
a common
to me.
answer, actually. Yes, very much so.
I'll give you an example from my experience. I like Help a lot more than A Hard Day's Night, even though A Hard Day's Night is a much better film, because I remember watching Help as a kid. It's just like,
yeah, and I remember seeing a Yellow Submarine, which my brother took me to, which is, kind of almost unwatchable these days, but still is,
it is. That and Magical Mystery Tour are like,
Oh, God, the Magical Mystery Tour is a slog for sure.
Yeah, it is it is. It is. So that I understand, and especially with the horror genre that we work in. There are different kinds of horror movies. I was talking about this with Mike McCarty from Autonomous Effects, and he has a podcast called The Head, the Tail, the Whole Damn Thing, where they examine movies. And there are certain movies that are now, and a good example of this is In a Violent Nature, where, to me, it's not a movie, it's a ride. And it's a series of kills, and how clever are the kills? That's kind of the movie. Yeah. Are these a series of clever kills? And I appreciate that stuff more than I like it. Mm-hmm. I like a story. One of the best genre films I've seen in the past couple of years, that I just saw the other day, that is a couple of years old, is A Pale Blue Eye.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, which I'd never seen. And like that to me was like gorgeous. Yeah. And I was never ahead of that story. I thought I was, but I wasn't, and so, like you get a movie or you get a ride which is, what In a Violent Nature is. It's a ride. Thanksgiving is a ride. Speaking of Eli Roth, and nothing wrong with it. It's a different.
It serves its purpose. It gives audiences, kind of what they expect. And that film, and certainly all of Eli's films, are very kind of self-reflective too. They're very self-aware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I took, and by the way, I love Thanksgiving, and I have my middle daughter was never into horror movies or anything. Just a girl, went to college and got into horror movies. And like, she came home and was like, I want to go see Thanksgiving. I was like, what? Not the one I want to go see. Yeah. Okay, great. And we saw it and loved it. And at the end she goes, all right, what were your favorite kills? And I was like, who are you? So, that movie means a lot to me now. That movie means a lot to me now.
Because of that,
Yeah.
Whereas my daughter loved Nosferatu, so just like right up her alley, and because she's really into Gothic literature and kind of the modern Gothic versus the original Gothic, and that movie could not be much more harkening back to Gothic literature.
Yeah, it's turbo Gothic, to be sure.
Yes. Yes.
But no, that's a great question. Did you enjoy that film?
Oh, I did, yeah. Well, I was also fortunate enough to see it at a screening because, somehow I still have a DGA card. So basically, I saw the Dolby Labs in this, beautiful setting where the black at the beginning of the film, it was pitch black in the theater where you're just in there going, like, what's going on? And then it starts up. And I saw it with my wife, who usually doesn't like horror at all, and she still appreciated it for its visual beauty, I think.
Yeah, I thought it was. I mean, and I thought it was great. And the friends of mine that went with, some liked it, some like, I don't like it. And I think maybe I'm getting older, or like, when you've made, as when you make a couple of movies, you just like, look, you got this thing finished. So hats off,
Exactly. Somehow you got that film made.
Yeah, hats off to you.
Seeming incredibly uncommercial, and the fact that it's doing well is just marvelous, because
and
things
just
like
the
that.
idea of, what if Frank Zappa was a vampire? That was what I really. I wanted to break down some of the episodes of Horror's Greatest, and then talk about some of the stuff that's coming out that you're excited about. Did you come up with these topics, or is that a Shudder thing?
I came up with them, but again, there's back and forth.
Sure.
I came up with a whole bunch of them, but then we narrowed it down to these, and then actually picking the films with them is sort of a process, basically. I certainly go in with the plan and a list of things that I think would qualify, but then also some of it comes out of interviewing people and what people are excited about, because you can have a few films, but if you don't get a few interesting sound bites about them or whatever else, it's harder to prop up the argument.
Yeah. And it's hard to you're doing these shows. There are a lot of shows they're called talking heads, where you'll get David Dasmalchian, who's a friend of ours, and you sit down and go like, okay, you're going to talk about them. But people, David knows this. A lot of people don't know how to speak in soundbite, and it's hard to think, well, it was like, that movie's just like, and like, no.
Well, I think as one of my guests once says to me, thank you for your very leading questions.
Yeah, but you have to do that
you have to do that to steer the conversation and get what you want out of them. But also part of what I do is when I do these interviews, I have a long list of the films and the topics. And first I talk to the guests and try to figure out which ones they want to talk about. There are rare people like yourself who can pretty much talk about everything. But then there's those, who are more like, I don't want to talk about that, which is fine. It's perfectly cool, because I don't want them to talk about films they don't like. I want them to talk about films that they're excited about. So, and usually somebody likes something I can get something out of them.
Right. Yeah, that's well put. And again, it can be I'm on a thread with a bunch of people, and there are people like Patton Oswalt and Bill Hader, and like we can just talk about anything, and you'll think like the Manster, oh my god, and we'll go for hours on the Manster, and Attack of the Mushroom People, or and it's just one of those things that I don't know what it is about that stuff that is so joyous to think about, but it's
there's a pleasure to be had in knowing that there's some strange little film that you actually glommed onto for whatever reason which is not necessarily going to be enshrined in the Hall of Cinematic Arts, but is nonetheless, highly enjoyable, like something like The Manster.
I remember seeing the movie Kingpin, the Farrelly Brothers movie.
Right.
And in the very late in the movie, they make a very obscure The Ghost and Mr. Chicken reference. And it's like there's the bowling thing, and somebody in the back just shouts, "Attaboy, Luther!" And I was like alone in the theater going, "That's the Ghost of Mr. Chicken! How do you know that?" Which is a movie I could talk about for 5 hours. And there's just this weird. It's just a weird, specific, joyous thing.
I made a point of including that. I made a point of including The Ghost of Mr. Chicken because of your pointed references to it during our interview.
Yeah. In a moment, she will bark hysterically to be let back in. She's like,
"Oh yes."
She's like, "I have to go out. I have to go out." You let her out. I have to come in.
I have a very large sheepdog who's like reclining outside in the other room, and if God help us if the mailman or the Amazon guy comes. So
yeah.
I realized that you originally asked me about the shows, and I should probably break down what the kind of the episodes are.
I'll do it. I'll lead you through it. But it is, it's fun. It's interesting because you came out of you didn't come out of punk rock, but you were involved in the punk rock scene in DC.
Yeah, very much so.
And it's very similar. It's the thing that the weird kids liked. and it's so important, that stuff is so important. And there's a lot of crossover, all punk rock kids, most punk rock kids I know are into horror movies and sci-fi movies. It's really just like, there are kids that are into horror and sci-fi movies, and then the punk kids are into horror, sci-fi movies, and drugs.
Although not the DC punks. So,
that was a pretty clean. That was a pretty straight edge kind of scene.
Very, very straight edge scene because I think a lot of commonality. I think with punks and with horror people is having shitty childhoods.
Yeah.
And a lot of anger. And we carry this anger forward with us, and it has to come out in either socially acceptable or unacceptable ways. So
that's exactly right. And a smaller percentage go into stand-up comedy, but it's still a similar.
Yes, and there's a big crossover there too, which is why there's a lot of comedians in the series as well, because same the Venn diagram.
Yeah, that's exactly what
overlaps.
That's exactly who was it I was talking to. I was at a show, a music show, and somebody mentioned War of the Gargantuas, and somebody's head spun around like an owl. What do you need to know?
Which is featured, of course, in the Hidden Gems episode. So,
so let's get to that, because that is we could talk about that all day. The first episode, which just premiered last week on December 31st, you can see it now on Shudder and AMC Plus, focuses on animal attack movies, which was a huge genre. I did a thing on this podcast about animal attack movies. Would you say the first one was The Birds? Or the first big studio one was the Birds?
The first real significant one is the Birds.
You could say Moby Dick.
Yeah. There's the Old Man in the Sea. Yeah, but which is actually contemporaneous with the Birds as far as film. But
actually, a streetcar named Desire is really an animal attack movie. If you think
but it's the first, I think, where they had you had the budget and you had a filmmaker invented enough to pull it off, obviously, and Hitchcock practically invented, half the tropes used in any animal attack movie you see today, and then Spielberg, did the other half of them.
Right? Yeah. There's a thing in the Birds, though, that when I watch it now, sometimes you watch a movie and you go, "Well, that doesn't make a lick of sense," and it's like they're all in the schoolhouse, and the birds are all outside, so they think, "We got to get out of here." Like, no. No, you're fine. You're inside. But it's like, but there's no scene.
It's interesting how many of these things we see, and particularly when we're kids, you just don't question whatsoever. It's just like, oh, well, that's what happened. Yeah, of course. Yeah. They all ran for it.
Yeah, because I just know, because when we have to pitch things, and you've got to go through this phalanx of rules, and every movie now is it's like, how is Annie Hall the hero's journey? Not every story has to be the fucking hero's journey. It's like that's the one they teach at agency school. But there are, like, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones is completely irrelevant to that plot. He does nothing.
True. That's true, yeah. He watches a lot of stuff.
He watches. His job is to prevent the Nazis from getting the Ark. He fails. The Nazis open the Ark. The Ark defends itself.
Yeah.
He does nothing. He does nothing. The only thing that might have changed is, had he not showed up, they would have given it right to Hitler, and then there wouldn't have been a World War II. That's the only thing.
Right.
So then the Birds, and then there was a huge resurgence of them in the early 70s when the environmental movement started.
Mm-hmm.
That's when you got, frogs.
Right.
Any animal got a movie. Mm-hmm. Well, there was, I guess you could say that in the 50s, would you say like Tarantula and the Deadly Mantis were animal attack movies, or is that the horror
monster movies? Those giant monster movies, yeah.
Right. There was frogs, my two of my favorites, and then you get to King Kong is a monster movie. Jaws is actually an animal attacks movie more than a monster movie, because technically it could be real.
It could happen.
Yeah. Frogs and Squirm.
Squirm, the best.
We need a movie about worms. Willard and Ben.
And Day of the Animals, which has all the animals in it, and attacking Leslie Nielsen wrestling a bear. So
I'm not familiar with Day of the Animals.
Oh,
I'm familiar with. I can tell you right now, it would be a great double feature with Night of the Lepus. Yeah, and then, it's one of those things where all of those movies, and then Jaws, and then there was just everything. The next year was just
Jaws
Grizzly.
Inspired.
Yeah.
Grizzly made, also by the guy made Day of the Animals, which is, you should really check out, because it's Animal Attack Camp classic.
Day of the Animals with Leslie Nielsen before he was funny, which is it's always weird when you see him in a straight role now, because
this is just barely straight. Like, he is playing an outsized personality, I think it's fair to say. Again, he wrestles a bear shirtless in the rain.
Yeah, okay, I'm in. And then also there's Night of the Lepus, which is giant rabbits. DeForest Kelley is in that. And then Food of the Gods.
Right.
With Marjoe Gortner.
Kingdom of the Spiders with Shatner.
Right. And the poster for that is really weird, the poster was like Shatner screaming, covered in spiders. But it was that. It's like if anybody would make that expression, it would be William Shatner.
Yes.
Yeah, there was that period of time where he really was just like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah, I'll do it."
And his character's really kind of gross in that one too. You know, is like kind of an egotistical, womanizing kind of. Anyway, yeah.
That's a great. You know, that's an interesting cul-de-sac to what we were talking about before we started talking. You know, he was in the shitter. You know, but he just kept getting out of bed and going, and it came around. You know, he just kept showing up, and it came around again. And there's, you know, you have to have a lot of faith in yourself when you're an independent contractor for life.
Yeah, God knows. Yeah, you have to. Very true. Just not going away.
Yeah,
can be, Eventually,
exactly.
you become a cult. You become an icon.
Yeah. It's true. It's like sometimes my biggest, you know, what are you known for? I'm not dead. I'm not dead yet. How's that for one? But yeah, Kingdom of the Spiders. And he was in a weird TV movie with Andy Griffith and I think Ronnie Cox, where these three guys that go on a motorcycle trip to Baja, and Andy Griffith plays like a really evil guy, and they start killing each other. It's a really weird.
This is triggering some, you know, something buried deep in my neurons, I think, from child.
Yeah. That's actually an interesting. I don't know if anybody would get any traction on this, but like just specifically about TV movies from the early to mid 70s. Because there were some amazing ones.
Oh yeah, there's some really great ones.
I mean, the Night Stalker, obviously, but
that's the best. Yeah. So,
but that one was, you know, Trilogy of Terror was a TV movie. Let's get the name of it while we're talking. A prick like Andy Griffith.
That's true. Yeah, facing the crowd.
Yeah,
hard to top.
You know, and so it's like that came from somewhere. This movie is called Pray for the Wildcats. All right, first I'm going to tell you the cast, then I'm going to tell you the plot, and then we're going to end this interview and watch it. Here's the cast. William Shatner, Andy Griffith, Robert Reed, Mike Brady, Marjo Gortner, Angie Dickinson, and Lorraine Gary.
Wow. That's a full house right there. That's
exactly a 1974 made-for-TV thriller about a psychopathic business executive chasing his workers on dirt bikes through the desert after he killed a young man. Why are we talking?
It sounds like a corporate retreat in 2026.
I know. That's going to be the X retreat in But yeah, that's like it's so 1970s. If a movie wore bell bottoms, this would be the movie. It's with the stars of 4 popular TV series cast against type. The film has gained a cult following, especially due to Griffith's against type performance as the sadistic villain, a drastic departure following his long run from the Andy Griffith Show. The film will lead Griffith to pursue more villainous roles over the next few years. That was the thing. Well, Andy Griffith's, you know, in the face in the crowd, he plays.
It's terrifying. Yeah.
A man like that could become president one day. But it's so funny to see that guy play that role. But it clearly comes from, I heard a story. I had 2 stories about Andy Griffith. One, friend of mine was a livery driver, and he's working in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Andy Griffith comes in to do a corporate speech, And I know this story is true, but I don't know if Andy Griffith meant what he said or if he just didn't want to talk to the guy. But he's driving him and he's going, Mr. Griffith, I just want to say, I grew up watching you and, it's really an honor to meet you. And without looking up, Andy just goes, "Nor I can get some head." Something tells me Andy was just like, I don't want to talk to anybody that day. And the other one was a guy I know had 5 lines on Matlock. And his dad worked on Facing the Crowd. His dad was like a grip and had a script from the film signed by everybody, like Bud Schulberg, Eli Kazan, signed by everybody but Andy Griffith, Patricia Neal, Walter Matthau, everybody signed it but Andy. And so he's waiting because that's going to be his big in. Andy's going to see that and go, "Oh my God, how do you have this?" Da-da-da. So he's waiting and waiting and waiting. And finally he goes, "Excuse me, Mr. Griffith, this is one of you." And he just say, "Huh? Oh, yeah, there you go. Thanks." He couldn't have cared less. He couldn't have cared less.
Oh, that's sad. That's sad.
I know.
The first story could only be better if it had been Don Knotts.
Well, he was supposedly quite the ladies' man.
Oh, yeah. Well,
yeah.
There you go.
There you go.
That's a documentary that needs to be made.
Yeah.
Think, so.
Don Knotts, Coxman.
He is in, let's see, the
Love God.
Love Machine? Yeah,
the Love God. Yeah, which is a weird, the timeless combination of Don Knotts and sex.
It's what America wanted back then.
People demanded it. It's so weird. Yeah, that was... So, yeah, Pray for the Wildcats. That's Dan Curtis made a lot of those TV movies. And
he was a good director, very underrated, I think. But when you really look at the stuff he did, and, the second Dark Shadows movie is like really grim. Like everybody, it's a bloodbath until the end.
Well, are you talking about House of Dark Shadows or Night of Dark Shadows? Yeah, well, that was the first one. House of Dark Shadows is fucking brutal. And it's really weird because it's the same story as the first year of the TV show, but it's so dark, and it's really like Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me to the first season of Twin Peaks. Like you go in expecting this kind of like darkly funny, haha, and they're like, "Holy shit, I don't want to see this stuff."
This is about child abuse.
Yeah, I don't want to watch this at all. And that's a movie. I mean, we're getting off topic, but that's a movie that I like. People that I really respect call that movie brilliant. And I just don't want to see that shit.
I understand your position, but I do agree with them that it's brilliant. So, because it really does tap into, I think it's a really disquieting, unvarnished look at, this thing that nobody wants to talk about and nobody wants to deal with, like that kind of incest and the traumatic effects of it. So, but it's just like, it's like you don't want to, if you see Irreversible once, that's enough. Yeah.
It's just like, I get it. But I also don't what did you think of the Twin Peaks, The Return?
I quite like Twin Peaks: The Return, but particularly episode 8, which is David Lynch doing a 50s monster movie. Yeah, that's just, just for that episode alone, it was worth it.
I love story. I love things to make sense, and I love a great mystery that when you undo it, it's like, oh, great, that hint was there and I never saw it. And then you're not going to get that from David.
No, you're not going to get that from him. And he's, he will be probably among the first to tell you that too.
Yeah, knock. Who's there? Doesn't matter. Look, a balloon. What balloon? That's a fish. What?
It's possessed fish for another dimension.
Yeah, but I again, like, I know it's me. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying I can't. It's like Springsteen. I know he's good. I can't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've even talked about this before. And I feel the same way about Dylan. It's like, I appreciate him objectively.
Uh-huh.
But that's not what I'm going to throw on,
Yeah.
So But
will you listen to Springsteen?
No, not really.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
Yeah,
but again, I appreciate him. I like Nebraska.
Sure.
Nebraska
right. That's sort of the fire walk with me of his oof.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Dylan, again, I grew up, my brothers are all Dylan freaks. And like literally, I remember the summer of 1976, every morning, the Desire album. Every morning, and it was just like, so I couldn't escape, and then you just learn to
Well, a lot of these things that we grow, they're all stuck in there, but
right.
I'm always telling my daughter, though, you can't really appreciate to really appreciate punk rock, you had to have lived through the music of the 70s that led up to punk rock.
Yeah, and all of that stuff was going on at the same time. Like the glory days, somebody just sent a clip around. It was a commercial for the Captain and Tennille's Christmas special. And it was like,
Lord.
it was like, Don Knotts, Marty Krofft, the Pointer Sisters. It was one of those late 70s polyester pantsuit specials. And that was at the heyday. That was probably 1977, 78.
Yeah.
Which was the heyday of punk. It's like, while they were filming this, X was at the Mask.
Yes.
It's just like, or they might not have been formed yet. I'm not sure. But it's that kind of thing. It's like these things all happened at the same time. London Calling came out the same year as Thank God It's Friday.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's weird that these things are, coexist. I'm assuming you haven't seen A Complete Unknown.
No, I have a screener.
It's good.
I intend to watch at some point.
Yeah, and you realize, and that was going like the sort of the folk music scene was also coinciding with the height of rock and roll. Like, not everybody in America was like Dave Van Ronk. Like, no, it was Buddy Holly, and he was dead, but it was all that stuff. Yeah.
No, I there are plenty of things I respect, but don't necessarily, go to,
right.
For all the time or whatever. Same thing with movies, obviously. So,
Who are the bands that were in DC when you were there writing?
We'll see. Minor Threat and the Faith at first, then a lot of these are all bands in the Discord label, or all people that became, chummy with. See, Velvet Monkeys was another. They're really good, and they're like a band that was pretty local and success. And then Rites of Spring, and then Fugazi, of course. So we're very good friends with that band.
Isn't Bob Mould from DC?
No, but I
know he lived there. He lived there for a while.
Yeah.
I know Husker Du came out of Minneapolis, but Bob, he moved. I know he lived there for a couple of years after Husker Du. I thought he had moved home, but it might have been a different.
Probably did. My friend Brendan drummed for him, I think, in a tour for. Well, yeah.
And were you from DC or Virginia or?
Kind of all over my father was, did various things for the military intelligence community.
Right. Sure.
So we
planes
moved
with cameras
around.
on them. Yeah.
Yeah. And rockets, he was into global thermonuclear war,
He had his hobbies.
I lived in Maryland for a while. Then I went to school in Michigan. And then after I graduated, I moved into DC, the city proper, and lived there for number of years.
Have you ever heard of Front Royal, Virginia?
Of course, yeah.
That's where my mother is from. I used to go there every summer.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah, Virginia is pretty. I mean, I used to live in Arlington in a group house with like 12 musicians for a while.
Yeah. Yay. 12 guys, one
hours.
towel.
Yeah.
After Animal Attacks, you have a similar concept, Killer Dates, which is a classic. What are some of the great killer date movies that people come up with?
Oh, Scream 2, which begins with the murder in the movie theater. That's a bad date. The Bride of Frankenstein
is a date movie. It Follows is really the ultimate date movie.
It Follows is a terrible date movie. American Psycho, a lot of bad dates in that one.
Right.
And Get Out, which you got. Some of these are more, relationship dates. Audition, of course, the Japanese.
Right. Yeah. That's
and
Carrie. You'll never look at Piano Wire the same.
Exactly. Yeah. And Carrie's kind of
Carrie
at the top
is a date
of the
movie.
list.
Yeah, Carrie is. Carrie is a bad date movie. Again, TV movies. I believe it was called "It Happened to Harry," where James Coco, I believe, is raped at gunpoint by a beautiful woman. Another TV movie. I got it. Close to James Coco. It Couldn't Happen to a Nicer Guy. Again, 1974, which is the 70s-ist of all the 70s years. An American made-for-TV black comedy starring Paul Sorvino and Joanna Cameron. The plot: Harry Walters is a stout real estate salesman who is randomly picked up by a beautiful woman and raped at gunpoint as a prank, because that always happens. He's later dropped off naked in a small town and left to explain to his wife, friends, and police how he was both kidnapped and raped by a woman. You can go pitch that tomorrow, but you'll have to move the day after.
Yeah. Good Lord. I watched a movie.
People want to watch Paul Sorvino having sex against his will.
Jesus, yeah. Have you seen the movie Death Cruise, which I just watched on I think YouTube? It's from 1974. Spelling Goldberg. It's basically it predates The Love Boat. But it's basically a murder mystery on the Love Boat.
Murder instead of love?
Yes, with that kind of cast, Richard Long in it. And
Dr. Z must be in that as well.
Yeah,
He's
I think
perfect for
Dr.
that.
Z was the missing link in that. Yeah.
Well, I was just watching, of course, I was watching Kolchak the Night Stalker on MeTV, which is 80% of what I watch. And it was the werewolf episode that was shot on the Queen Mary, that was shot on the Dr. Queen Mary with Eric Braeden as the werewolf and Dick Gautier as the swinger on the cruise.
Yeah. That checks out.
Yeah. Episode 3 specializes in hidden gems, and this sounds like the one where I would really go bananas with.
Yeah, Hidden Gems is for the core fans, I think. So, because the hard part making the series like this is because this also airs on AMC Plus, and it's meant to appeal to a range of audiences, from people who may have a fresh interest in horror to like the diehards and people who watch Shudder all the time and know it inside out. And so the Hidden Gems is an attempt to just talk to people who like these movies, and everybody I know has some like hidden little favorite or in some cases, dozens of them.
Yeah.
That are not as well known. So, for instance, Howard S. Berger is not the special effects guy, but he does he's done hundreds of commentary tracks. Howard mentions this movie Fright by Peter Collinson's directed, which I'd not heard of, and which was incredible. Really scary and disturbing. And Susan George being menaced as she's babysitting in a house, and it's before Halloween, before Carpenter's Halloween too. It's very, so, but it's also British and disturbing in that way that kind of British movies from the 70s could be uniquely disturbing.
Very much so. All those Amicus.
Yeah. And, Let's Scare Jessica to Death and Ghost Watch.
Let's Scare Jessica to Death is really scary. And it's 71, right? It's 71 or 72. So, because, and here's how you know. No way on earth would some of those teeth be allowed in a major motion picture today. There are people whose smiles look like the skyline of Dresden the day after the bombing. No, he's just a guy. And you could have shitty teeth in a movie now if it was intrinsic to the plot. But just like a guy with bad teeth, you're not getting in a movie. And we were watching, I'm just going to say this sentence for what it is just because it sounds ridiculous. I was watching Airplane 75 on a giant screen.
Okay.
And the thing that we could not get over was Charlton Heston's teeth, because this was just before he got them capped. And there's like a giant, literally, it's 12 feet big. It's like a piece of bread in his teeth. It's just insane. It was the 70s. It doesn't matter. It's teeth. Go ahead.
Yeah, nobody cared. Yeah,
and his mouth looked like an experiment. Like, how many teeth can we get in a mouth?
I'm still very suspicious of British people on television who have perfect teeth.
Yeah. Do you remember the show Are You Being Served?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a guy. My dad loved that show, and there was a guy on that show with just like teeth that were like, "Whoa, buddy, fix that."
It's less of a priority.
Yeah, back then. So what are some of your hidden gems?
Well, the one I mentioned in the show, because I actually wind up appearing in a couple of these things, is The Stone Tape, which is written by Nigel Neal, who gave us the Quatermass movies.
Which are huge.
Which are terrific and incredibly influential. If you ever watch Doctor Who, you basically seen Quatermass.
Right,
And the Stone Tape is really disturbing, but it's shot, I think that's 74, but it's was shot on tape, and it's kind of hard to find here, as are a lot of these things.
Yeah.
But it's basically a story about greed. It has, the male lead is just an utter pig, he's just absolutely horrible. And there's a woman who's the smartest person in the room and who nobody takes seriously. And she, of course, is the one person who is sensitive to these psychic phenomena happening in this ancient manner that these, basically, a team of scientists comes in and they're looking for a new way to record information that will be better than tape. And they realize that sounds can be recorded into the stone, like ancient stone. So they're looking for a way to monetize this. And so they come in with all this equipment to figure out, what are we hearing? We're hearing these weird things that are somehow, embedded in the stone, recorded in the stone. But of course, what winds up being recorded in the stone is the farther back you go, what is retaining are the most evil and kind of emotional experiences that have happened in this space, which leads back to essentially like druids and murders and, mass sacrifices.
Wow.
And so, it all goes very badly.
Wow. Yeah.
And it's an amazing film that it made, which I hadn't heard of until relatively recently. I think when Edgar Wright mentioned it. So
The Stone Tapes. I got to check that out. The last one is a interesting category, space horror, which is it is its own genre, and it goes back to, well, Planet of the Vampires. Before that, yeah, one of the best posters, a better poster than a movie.
Yeah, The Terror from Beyond Space, which is, when you marry it, The Terror from Beyond Space and Planet of the Vampires, you get Alien.
Yeah, you absolutely get Alien. Yeah, or the Green Slime.
Yeah.
We talked about War of the Gargantuas. I guess, is that a hidden gem? That's pretty well known.
It's only known to people like us, Dan.
See, that's the thing, is I assume, everybody knows about War of the Gargantuas.
It's not common currency.
It's one of those movies, there's that it's like 65 to 68. It's a brief little window where, especially like the Toho, those movies that just had a look about them that was just gorgeous. You Only Live Twice is one of those movies. Yeah. Also shot at Toho partially. But they're just like the clothes, the style, and just the color saturation, the set design. They all look the same and they all look beautiful. And even like War of the Gargantuas and Monster Zero, even the backdrop, the painted backdrops, the city miniatures, they're just gorgeous. And you can watch that without the sound on, and it's so pleasant.
Well, particularly now that you can actually get decent restorations and, watch them on, Blu-ray and 4K. I know they just released the early Godzilla films in 4K with these beautiful restorations.
Yeah, I have that.
And they look, compared to when we saw them on television, because they're all shot in like Toho scope, widescreen, that, they're cut to 4:3 and they're probably often 16 millimeter. And colors were faded. But you going back and looking at them, it's like, oh my God, these are gorgeous.
Yeah. I was watching a cut of Goldfinger off of the Laserdisc because it had the original Laserdisc commentary, which they quickly realized we can't have this.
Yeah,
Sean was a bit
counter to the message.
Yes, Sean was a raging asshole. And some of the green screen lines are awful. They're just like, they really did get in there and clean them up.
One movie that's really profited from people going back and fixing it was the Devil Rides Out. And there's a part during the exorcism seance where there's supposed to be this giant spider, and the blue around the spider is like about a foot thick, and it always kind of detracted from it, but now somebody went back and actually tidied it up. So
that's right. But they also redid the effects on the original Star Trek series.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
But they made them look like better versions of that era. Like they didn't go insane with it. And that I'm kind of like, well, as long as you don't delete the originals from the catalog, that's fine. You don't want to Lucas it.
The only thing I disagree with is what they did to the Doomsday Machine. I thought it looked cooler in the original version.
I'd have to go back and look at that one because I can't tear my eyes off William Wyndham.
I love William Wyndham. He was great. Such a part of my childhood. I think, whenever he pops up, I'm always excitedly pointing him out to my wife, who looks at me with, puzzlement.
He's also Will Decker, who is in the Doomsday Machine, who is the father of Stephen Collins' character in Star Trek: The Motion Picture. People don't know.
All right.
And he's the president of the United States in Escape from the Planet of the Apes. And he's in one of the better episodes of Night Gallery. They're tearing down Tim Riley's bar.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about Goldfinger, which leads us into episode 4, which is on film scores, which is a whole other nerd world.
That's something I wanted to do forever. Like a couple of these, space horror, I've always wanted to do a show on, and especially film scores, which could have been, a series long.
Yeah, a whole series. There are podcasts dedicated exclusively to film. What are some of your favorites?
Yeah. As modern soundtracks, I really like Under the Skin, and I like pretty much anything Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross have done. So,
Gone Girl is one of my favorites.
Oh yeah, and a lot of that's their soundtracks. I just like to put on as music when I'm writing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
Except, especially like when I'm listening to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, you just skip the first cut because I can't write to that.
Exactly. Yeah. But the rest of it's gets you in the mood for sure. Any of the Jerry Goldsmith soundtracks, I think, basically, including Planet of the Apes, obviously. And,
very seminal soundtrack.
Alien, The Omen, and that guy was just so versatile and clever.
How is the Alien soundtrack?
Well, the Alien soundtrack's interesting because a lot of the soundtrack was actually from the movie Freud, which had been done earlier, and he kind of repurposed it. So a lot of stuff went on in the background there with Ridley Scott, I think, when they were making it, because he had one theme and that it was rejected, and this was considered to be too romantic, and Scott wanted something that was a little more discordant,
right?
Which certainly worked. God knows everything works in Alien. So
you can also see like Ridley Scott's idea of a romance scene is Harrison Ford kicking the shit out of Sean Young.
Yes. And let's see, obviously Psycho. I mean, Psycho pretty much changed soundtracks for horror movies forever.
Yep.
And it is brilliant. So, and just the orchestration is so pointed. I've got a little tribute to Bernard Herrmann in this episode that also mentions The Day the Earth Stood Still, for instance, which is like a double theremin.
Yeah.
Which is really crazy. Cool.
You know what's a great soundtrack? We talked about it, The House of Dark Shadows. Bob Cobra.
Oh, yeah.
Great sound. And it's that great 70s, lot of like weird xylophone stuff, which is really good. And that's a beautiful soundtrack. The original King Kong is an amazing soundtrack.
Of course, yeah. Well, that's like ground zero for so many of these things. But you have this shift from, which is being reflected in general across movie making, from these full orchestral scores to things that are a little more ambient and a lot looser,
right? Which is
an interesting shift, and at the same time, I think it's like what's happening now. It's a fad. Things will change again.
Yeah.
So,
well, you're talking about Planet. Like, I would equate the Planet of the Apes soundtrack with something like Gone Girl, which is it's more ambient than orchestral, and it certainly in the case of Apes, it helps bring you out of this. The whole joke was that you're not on Earth, and so they had to make everything look as unearthly as possible until
And even so, though, Goldsmith still gives you a theme. It still gives you that little horn thing, the little So you'll always think of that movie and think of those notes. Much like Jaws. Jaws is a couple of notes, and you'll never forget it.
Yeah, and then when you listen to that soundtrack, and then it's a pirate movie. Like after, like there's the Jaws theme, and then everything else is. He's happy.
It's an adventure film. Yes. Yeah. Out on the sea.
So, what is your favorite space horror film? Would it be 2001?
Yeah, it has to be 2001 because that movie is just such a landmark, and also a lot of, again, same thing too, as seeing it as a little kid. It just had a huge impact on me.
A movie that is much scarier than The Shining, which I think is a great movie, but I don't find scary.
I agree too.
Yeah,
Shining.
One day we'll have to go to dinner with our wives, so you can back me up on this, because my wife is like, "You're insane. That movie's terrifying." I'm like, "No, it's not. It's not scary at all."
It really isn't.
No, it's not. It's not. But you can't be right alone with your wife. You need backup.
That is very true. Yes.
Well, this was great. The show is called Horror's Greatest. It's on Shudder and AMC Plus, And it's up now, so tune in and watch it, and then be on the lookout for Kurt's salute to the TV movies of 1974.
Yeah, as soon as somebody gives me some money to make that, we're going right into production.
Those clips are cheap. We'll have a salute to Dan Curtis. So we'll be in touch about that and some other stuff. I wish I could keep talking to you, but I have to go parent. Yeah. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. Yeah. I really appreciate it.
It was great. Horror's Greatest on Shudder and AMC Plus. Kurt Sayenga. I was wanting to say Seneca. Kurt Sayenga. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Other podcasts reach for the sky. Dana Gould Hour.
We barely try.
This has been the Dana Gould Hour, brought to you by the Internet. Music by Andy Paley with Jake Posner behind the board. Produced by Jeff Fox. Graphic design and web production by Spencer Hunt and Segan Friend. Sound editing and post-production by Jalinda Palmer and Joe Napolitano. Tom Kenny speaking.
I'm a DJ, I'm a person, I'm a singer, I love to sing and DJ. Boom! Peace out. You want me? Peace out. Boom.